Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing case. The case of David Viens. In California, a man jumped off a cliff into the raging waves. A woman who knew him watched in amazement. The jumper was David Viens, a successful businessman and celebrity chef who owned a popular restaurant chain. What could have motivated such a successful man to take such a drastic action? The situation was more complicated than it seemed, as David was the prime suspect in a serious criminal case at the time of his jump. According to his friends, David Viens was charismatic, intelligent, and attracted attention wherever he went. David began dating Dawn in the early 90s while working as a chef at a restaurant where she worked as a waitress. At the time, he had 3 children from previous relationships who lived with their mother, but he remained involved in their lives. David focused on the future, leaving behind his past problems and mistakes. David and Dawn's relationship progressed quickly, leading to their marriage in 1997. At that time, David owned a successful chain of restaurants, which provided him with both fame and a stable income. They tied the knot in Lomita, California, a small town with a population of 20,000 known for its safety and low crime rates, making it an ideal setting for their wedding. A close family friend, Joko Knights, who ran a small auto repair shop, became someone they trusted deeply. Through their friendship, Joko learned some private details about their lives, including that David had a domineering personality and that Dawn sometimes struggled with alcohol. Dawn's addiction escalated to the point where she began drinking early in the morning, hiding the bottles so her husband wouldn't find out she had been drinking. She drank to cope with David's cruelty. To hide her finances from her husband, she asked a family friend named Joe to keep her money. According to him, she last gave him money on October 18, 2009. And Dawn had saved over $1,000. The following Monday, Dawn did not show up for work. Her car was parked near her house, but she was missing. Worried, Joe asked David where his wife was, and David replied that she had left the house. He explained that she felt pressured by her husband, so she wanted to go to alcohol withdrawal. Joe is skeptical of David's answer. He begins to monitor David's behavior and realizes that Katie Galvin, one of the waitresses, is having an affair with him. Katie used to work at David's restaurant, and she is now trying to replace Dawn. Dawn is still unreachable, her phone is turned off, and her car is still parked at home. This raises the question, where could Dawn have gone without a car? Joe observes that Dawn's belongings are thrown out. After failing to contact Dawn, her friends filed a police report. David kept telling everyone the same story. They had an argument, and she left, taking only her expensive Louis Vuitton bag. It was strange that she left her car behind, since it was necessary to get around in that small town, which had no airport or train station. She would have needed her own transportation to leave. It seemed unlikely that a rich woman like Dawn would take the intercity bus. While investigating David's past, police found out that he was not only a skilled cook but also sold large quantities of weed. He had been involved in this activity before 2009. His restaurant business was thriving, so he didn't need to closely oversee it. This gave him the opportunity to focus on distributing drugs to small dealers. In 2005, David was arrested for drug trafficking, revealing that this was not his first offense. He had been convicted of similar activities in 1993. David worked as a police informant, always available and assisting when needed. This cooperation led to the dismantling of a citywide drug trafficking network, for which he served only 1 year in prison. In 2008, after being released from prison, David got married and moved to Lomita with Dawn, where they lived until the unfortunate events of 2009. When his wife mysteriously disappeared, he asked his daughter, Jackie, to accompany him to the restaurant to help with the business. Jackie helped with the business, while Katie was his mistress and aspired to be Mrs. David in the future. Jackie was 19 years old at the time. David kept telling everyone the same story about his wife, Dawn's disappearance, that they had a fight and she left him. However, Jackie suspected that her father was not telling the truth. Jackie directly asked her father where Dawn was. David shocked her by admitting that he had accidentally killed Dawn and asked his daughter to keep quiet and not call the police. Jackie agreed. Meanwhile, the police began to suspect David. In response, he took drastic action by asking his new girlfriend Katie to send text messages from Dawn's phone, pretending that everything was fine and there was no need to worry. David thought that once the police saw these messages, they would close the case. However, these messages only raised suspicions. This was because Dawn always signed her messages with the nickname Pixie, but Katie made a mistake and wrote the nickname wrong. The police obtained a search warrant for the David family home and conducted an inspection. They discovered blood in the bedroom and another room, but the stains were old and showed signs of attempted removal, making them unusable as evidence. 16 months after the Dawn's disappearance, it was impossible to find proof of the David's guilt. Although the police were almost certain that the David had killed Dawn, they lacked solid evidence against him. The only lead was the blood found in the house, which ultimately led nowhere. Reporters closely followed the case from the beginning, as it was a novel event in the area. This media attention benefited the investigation by keeping the suspect on edge, as people under pressure tend to make mistakes. One day, a reporter visited a restaurant and loudly claimed that David's entire house was covered in blood. This was a bluff. But it had the effect. David became anxious, and the reporter was expelled from the restaurant. The police decided to question David's daughter, Jackie. 2 police officers met her and took a confession from her. Jackie told them what had happened and then called her father, warning him that the police would be coming to arrest him until a warrant was issued. The press learned of the details and published the story on February 23, 2011. Overwhelmed, David confessed everything to his girlfriend, Katie Galvin. He claimed it was an accident and expressed that he did not want to spend the rest of his life in prison, saying that ending his life was the better option. After saying this, he rushed to his car, and Katie followed him. Despite the situation, Katie felt calm, believing that he would not harm her. They reached the cliff where David had left Katie in the car. He ran and jumped off the cliff. Amazingly, the 25-meter fall was not fatal for David. He survived. However, David's body had many broken bones. He was rescued from the cliff by a helicopter and taken to the hospital. If he had jumped head first, he would have died, but fate had other plans. A few days later, he confessed to the police from his hospital bed. He mentioned that the most recent conflict with his wife was due to Dawn's bad habits. She was not only abusing alcohol but also addicted to illegal drugs. His daughter confirmed his testimony. David explained that their conflict on the night of the incident was due to illegal substances. He came home after midnight, exhausted from working 90 hours a week. All he wanted was to relax, but he anticipated that his wife would return under the influence of drugs and alcohol. Since she wasn't home yet, he locked the bedroom door to avoid being disturbed and went to sleep. Later, when his wife returned and tried to enter the bedroom, he told her to sleep in another room and not to bother him. The Dawn became angry and burst into the bedroom, breaking the lock, and started hitting David in the face. Afterwards, she ran into the living room. David followed Dawn, saw the substances she had, took them away, and threw them in the sink. In response, she acted aggressively and lunged at him. To protect himself, David used table tape to bind her hands to prevent her from moving, attacking, or throwing anything at him. He mentioned that he had to deal with his wife's psychoses this way more than once. He restrained her and left her there until the effects of the substances faded. While she screamed in anger, David just wanted peace and ended up taping her mouth shut. He went to bed around 3 in the morning. In the morning, as was his habit, he rolled over to his wife's side but found her gone. He fell asleep again, forgetting that she was still tied up in the living room. When he woke up and went downstairs, he found Dawn dead. David realized that under the influence of drugs, she had started to feel nauseous and choked because her mouth was taped shut. In despair, he felt that his life was over. But he didn't want to spend the rest of his life in prison. So he decided to dispose of her body. He carefully packed it and took it to his restaurant. David describes how he used a large vat in the restaurant to dip his wife in water and boil her for 4 days to tenderize the meat. He then cut her body into pieces, put them in garbage bags, and dumped them in a dumpster. When the garbage truck collects the restaurant's food waste, the remains of a boiled human being would likely go unnoticed because they would be unrecognizable. It is hard to understand how this could have happened when the restaurant was open at the time. During the investigation, restaurant staff claimed that they did not remember anything suspicious. The story seemed unbelievable and many people doubted David's testimony. Nearly 2 years later, David, now in a wheelchair, appeared in court. After the first hearing, he dismissed his lawyer, believing that the lawyer was not effectively handling his case. The prosecution suggested a possible motive for the murder. David had previously complained that Dawn had stolen about $200 from the restaurant cash register. During the trial, David claimed that after 17 years of marriage, he would never intentionally harm his wife, especially over such a small amount of money. He found it ridiculous to be charged with first-degree murder for such a trivial reason. David maintained that he had always provided for his wife, buying her expensive clothes. However, the prosecutor portrayed David as a cold-blooded and cruel killer who had planned the murder in advance. The Dawn feared her husband and saved money to leave him, but she ran out of time. The jury deliberated for over 5 hours on the case. David Viens was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2023 after serving 15 years. Currently, he remains incarcerated but could be released at any time. The remains of Dawn Viens have never been located. Despite extensive searches at the dump, David claimed he hid his wife's skull and jawbone in his mother's attic, but the police were unable to find any evidence there. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Martin Durham. Martin Durham was born in 1969 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He was an ordinary child and lived in good conditions, all around his natural beauty. In addition, he loved fishing and hiking, capturing photos along the way. He usually took a tent and a hiking backpack to enjoy a few days in the fresh air, he often accompanied by an older cousin. At 17, Martin met his first love, Glenna Johnson, who was a year older. They live in the same area and attended the same school. Their romance was brief, leading to a quick breakup, but they got back together and broke up many times. They shared many interests and could not stay apart for long. Despite their similarities, but they ultimately decided to end the relationship and go their separate ways. For a long time, they neither saw nor communicated with each other. During this period, Martin met another woman, Christine Keller, and he quickly fell in love with her. The two of them get along very well and then they soon moved in together. After a short time of dating, he realized that she would be an ideal life partner, and they should build a stronger relationship. In the following years, Christine and Martin married and moved into a house given to them by their parents, located in a quiet residential area of the city. Over the next few years, they had 2 sons and a daughter. Christine focused on managing the home and caring for the children, while Martin worked to support the family. In addition to his main job repairing cars, he also worked at a restaurant in the city of Vlam. Despite this, the early years of their marriage were challenging, especially because their children were born close in age. So, they had many difficulties in taking care of their young children. They slept little and were often exhausted, leading to frequent arguments. However, they were determined to overcome these difficulties. Martin was a devoted father and made every effort to support his family. Many people saw him as a role model. In March 1995, Martin's family faced a tragedy when a truck ran a red light and collided with his car. The truck dragged his car along the road, crushing both Martin and the driver. Martin suffered severe injuries, including broken ribs, a broken jaw, broken legs, and a traumatic brain injury that severely damaged a large part of his brain. Doctors tried their best to save him, but he was in a coma for months. Then, he underwent multiple surgeries and slowly began to recover. However, Martin's difficulties were not over. It took a long time for him to return to his normal life. He had to relearn basic movements, like sitting up and holding his head, before progressing to more complex ones. The accident left his face disfigured, and he lost some brain functions. Despite the difficulties, he tried to overcome them and return to a normal life with his family. He spent a long time moving around in a wheelchair before transitioning to crutches. Although he gradually overcame the physical effects of the accident, he remained psychologically affected. Martin could no longer work as an auto mechanic to support his family, and he encountered many physical limitations that turned his life upside down. The hardest thing for him was not being able to maintain the active lifestyle he had before. He loved camping, fishing, and traveling, but now he was bedridden and just hang around the house. Every movement caused him severe pain, which only the strongest painkillers could help manage. According to doctors, these effects would persist throughout his life. This challenging time affected not only Martin, who survived the accident, but also his family. His wife, Christine, previously managed only the children and household chores, but now she had to handle the family's finances. She was compelled to enroll the children in daycare and find a job to support them, in addition to caring for her sick husband. Fortunately, her close relatives pitched in to help. With their support, Christine was able to manage all the difficulties. However, Martin also became aggressive and hostile towards his wife. In addition, he also lost his memory. He cannot remember much about his past, including family events, and sometimes forgot his children's names. Longtime friends and acquaintances became strangers to him. He was isolated because he did not communicate well with people due to severe memory loss, difficulty concentrating, and confusion. This makes him cold and looked down upon. Martin often retreated into his own thoughts, which he kept to himself. Meanwhile, he was recovering from injuries and regularly attended physiotherapy, sometimes staying in the hospital for treatment. He switched doctors several times, but fortunately, his physical condition gradually improved. However, he was still tormented by the psychological aftermath of his trauma. At the same time, Martin constantly controls the family's spending and criticized his wife's financial management. This made their relationship more and more strained. This was a very difficult time for the young family. Martin went through a difficult process of dealing with trauma and psychological problems, but was unable to overcome them. Some issues made him angry, and he often lost his temper with his wife without justification. Christine did her best to accept the changes in her husband's behavior, but eventually, she felt she couldn't take it anymore. Years after the accident, Christine filed for divorce. Later, she admitted that she didn't want to do it, but she couldn't stand Martin any longer. The divorce was a major blow to Martin. He felt resentment and disappointment for a long time. Some time passed, he was able to regain his spirits. He received a large insurance payout for the accident, which he used to buy real estate and purchase another house. In addition, Martin was also paid a monthly sum by his insurance company as compensation for the accident during his recovery. Thanks to this, he was able to continue his life and take care of himself without financial hardship. After that, Martin moved to his new house with the parrot that Christine loved so much. She had left the bird with he to keep him company and prevent loneliness. The bird, a 15-year-old African gray parrot named Bat, was quite old. This new house is located in Sand Lake, not far from his previous house. He had big plans to recover as soon as possible, so he could return to normal life for the sake of his children. Martin quickly settled into his new place. He kept in regular contact with his children, and even his relationship with his ex-wife Christine improved. She noticed that he finally had an interest in life and enjoyed spending time in the backyard. He discovered his talent for design on his own, and this was soon recognized by others. Neighbors frequently sought his help for designing private gardens and lawn care. This job has helped him earn more income and gain confidence in dealing with life's difficulties and helping him improve his health. Doctors have observed a steady improvement in his condition and has a positive direction. Although Martin's health and mood have improved significantly. But Christine still hesitated to return to him. She is afraid that old problems may return. She kept her distance, maintained contact, and brought the children to visit. By chance, Martin reconnected with his first love, Glenna Johnson, who had also recently divorced. They rekindled old feelings and began a romantic relationship. Glenna eventually moved in with Martin. Glenna's children remained with her ex-husband, but she still visits them regularly. Martin's children also visited from time to time. Glenna and Martin enjoy activities such as fishing, hunting, and hiking. She assisted with his physical limitations during these times. However, it was challenging, so they often opted for walks in the area or visits to the casino, which they loved in their youth. These casino visits have become a monthly routine for them, where they tested their luck. They became well known in the local community, often invite friends and acquaintances over to play poker, backyard barbecues, and generally forming a harmonious partnership. It seems they have found each other again and are happy together. In the summer of 2005, Glenna and Martin decided to get married. Everything appeared fine, but their closest friends knew there were underlying issues in the seemingly perfect relationship. After the accident, Martin changed, he becoming more short-tempered and demanding. He tried to control Glenna and disliked when she did things without him or left him alone for errands. He tries to manage all their finances, which caused problems. She tried to manage family problems by himself, but he was suspicious that she was not entirely honest, spending excessively on unnecessary items. During this time, he continued to receive disability benefits, and his wife took on guardianship, but she had one weakness. Glenna was a gambler and spent a lot of money on it. She visited the casino much more often than her husband, without him knowing, and she losing a lot of money. Additionally, there were issues between Glenna and his ex-wife, Christine. Apparently, Martin frequently complained about Christine, accusing her of leaving him during a tough time after the accident, but he didn't talk about how he made Christine's life unbearable. Christine tolerated him for 2 years before leaving, but she continued to support him as much as she could. Christine kept in touch with Martin's and brought the children to visit he. However, he spoke negatively about Christine to his new wife, Glenna. Plus, Glenna also expressed that she absolutely does not like the children of Martin and Christine. This made Christine and her children feel uncomfortable, to the point where they didn't want to visit Martin when Glenna was there. They disliked hearing unpleasant things about their mother, Christine, and she supported their decision by not bringing them to their father. Martin became angry with his ex-wife and constantly quarreled with her. This led to tension with the children and Glenna. Overall, the relationships deteriorated, and everyone's behavior only worsened the situation. A clear testament to Glenna's deep love for Martin is the tattoo of his name on the back of her hand, which she got 18 years ago when they were dating. She never removed it, likely because she had strong emotions for him all these years. She has still loved him for the past 15 years and waited for the moment they would be together again. However, within the family, the relationship was far from romantic, with frequent disputes over money. Martin suspected Glenna was overspending and debt piled up. She often took money from him without his knowledge. Over time, she took complete control of the family's finances, further straining their relationship. Glenna began using the check from the insurance company that Martin received every month as an allowance. In addition, she also illegally traded in some strong drugs. At the time of the accident, Martin did not take these medications regularly, resulting in a large amount of medication being left unused. Glenna sold these medications secretly. However, his involvement in this activity remains unclear. Some believe he was complicit in the sale, help him earn extra income while he is recovering from a traffic accident and is struggling financially. But there are also those who oppose this theory, who believe that Glenna sold the remaining amount of medicine without telling him. Even though Glenna and Martin's relationship was having problems, they persisted in a toxic relationship for over 11 years. By 2015, they still acted friendly and were always seen together, but they no longer concealed their failing marriage. Occasionally, the discontent between them led to increasingly frequent scandals. One of Glenna's friends later claimed to have witnessed their breakup, during which Glenna threatened to kill Martin. Despite this, they mostly maintained the appearance of an ideal couple, walking hand in hand as they did at the start of their relationship in their youth. By May 2015, the issue of divorce had become serious. One morning that May, Christine, Martin's ex-wife, discovered that Martin was selling his house. She found an advertisement on an auction site and was very surprised. She immediately called Martin to ask why he suddenly wanted to sell a house he loved so much, where he devoted his love to creating his garden. However, he was unaware of this sale, so he asked his current wife, Glenna, about it. Glenna claimed it was a mistake and said she would resolve it, but the fact is she didn't solve it. Previously, their car had been repossessed due to debts, and Glenna had similarly assured Martin it was a mistake and she would fix it, but nothing changed. The auction for the house was scheduled for 3 weeks later, by the end of the month. Perhaps due to the debt accumulated during their marriage, and Glenna wanted to sell the house to pay off the debt, but she did not want to tell Martin about this. On May 13, 2015, one of Martin's neighbors visited him early in the morning to discuss some routine matters. The neighbor was surprised when no one responded to his knock, as Martin usually kept his door open at that time. Concerned, the neighbor entered the house and called out to Martin and Glenna, but no one replied. Venturing further inside, he discovered the reason for the silence. In their bedroom, he found Martin lying on the floor in a pool of blood, and next to it is Glenna, who was bleeding heavily from the head. Terrified that the perpetrator might still be around, the neighbor fled from the scene and immediately called 911. When the ambulance arrived, they realized that Martin was lifeless. Martin was lying on his side, wearing only his underwear, his body already cold, and the doctors confirmed that the 46-year-old had died several hours earlier. However, Glenna was still alive and even conscious. She tried to say something. She managed to utter a fragmented sentence that was not understood. Glenna was found lying next to Martin, fully clothed. However, she could not provide any useful information about the incident. She was rushed to the hospital for medical treatment. A bullet had grazed her skull without damaging the brain, so her injuries were not severe. She recovered quickly after surgery at the clinic. Detectives were able to question her soon after, but she was still undergoing treatment, and they had other cases to handle. The investigators tried to piece together the sequence of incident by examining the crime scene thoroughly. It did not appear to be a robbery, because valuables or personal items in the house are not lost. Even the money, left in a visible spot, was untouched. Additionally, there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting Glenna and Martin might have known the attacker and let him in. During this time, police discovered that Martin was taking strong painkillers and Glenna involved in selling them. There was then an assumption that it was that trade that may have triggered the attack. The entire scheme of selling medicines was uncovered, and detectives believe there may have been a conflict with the buyer during the transfer process. However, by that time, forensic experts had already examined and analyzed the crime scene, including the bullets and weapons found in the house. The pistol was later tested and confirmed to be the murder weapon. In fact, this pistol has belonged to Martin for many years, but both of them were shot with it. First, the attacker must enter the house, know exactly where the weapon is and retrieve it. Then he finds the magazine, loads the gun and then starts shooting. This plan seemed too complicated and therefore unlikely. Moreover, during a more thorough search of the bathroom, Martin's painkillers was found and had not been stolen, which ruled out the possibility of selling them and ruled out the motive for the crime being an attack by the buyer. The weapon used to kill Martin was found under the sofa in the living room. There is a lot of blood there, which did not match the location where the body was found. Apparently an attack also took place in the living room, a shooting, and then the shooting continued in the bedroom. Martin might have been shot in the living room, and then the body moved, but why was this done? It seemed this was done intentionally, perhaps to stage the crime and mislead the investigation. This assumption was confirmed when a spent cartridge case was found in the living room, indicating that the shooting occurred there. As the investigation progressed, more questions surfaced. Blood samples from different rooms were analyzed, revealing unexpected results. The analysis showed that all shots fired at Martin happened in the bedroom. His blood was not present in the living room, and there were no signs of his body being moved. The blood found in the living room belonged solely to Glenna, who was discovered in the bedroom. The bullet casing found in the living room corresponded to the shot that hit her head, supporting this theory. But how did she manage to reach the bedroom after this injury? Medical experts informed the police that this scenario was possible because Glenna's injury was less severe than initially thought. She could have reached the bedroom by herself, especially since she was conscious when found. Nonetheless, the situation appeared unusual. From then on, the police began to suspect that Glenna fired at her husband and then injured herself to divert suspicion. However, these theories still needed solid evidence. At this time, the police were unable to interview Glenna, as she was still in the hospital undergoing treatment and recovery. They took her mobile phone for investigation. Through this, detectives discovered that their family was experiencing a severe financial crisis. Just the day before Martin's death, she searched online for how to use the Uger 6 pistol, the same gun involved in Martin's death and her own head wound. Police found 2 farewell letters, in which Glenna apologized to her children for what she was about to do. She also said goodbye to everyone, indicating her plan to end her life. The Supreme Court identified Glenna's as the perpetrator of the crime. Based on all the collected evidence, the investigation was reopened, but something compelled her to shoot her husband first. Martin was killed in the bedroom, and Glenna shot herself in the head in the living room. However, unlike Martin, she did not die instantly and managed to reach the marital bedroom. This can be clarified by talking to her, so the police waited until they could interview her. They continued gathering evidence in the meantime. Martin's family was already convinced that they were not attacked by a stranger. The shooter was his wife, Glenna. Christine Keller, the ex-wife of Martin, was shocked by the events. Although she never thought highly of Glenna, especially because of Glenna's aggressive behavior, but she did not expect this to happen. Then, Christine took her old parrot home to the children. Meanwhile, detectives were finally able to speak with Glenna, who was feeling well. Doctors confirmed that she understood what was happening around her and ready to talk to the detectives. Despite the doctor's positive assessment, But she told the investigators that, in her view, she never wrote farewell letters and did not plan to end her life, let alone kill her husband. Police officers were concerned because Glenna completely denied being involved in the attack on her husband, yet she also claimed she couldn't remember what happened on that tragic day. This inconsistency seemed suspicious and hinted that she might be a suspect, but at that time, they had no solid evidence against her. Glenna was released from the hospital several months later. Meanwhile, the investigation had not uncovered any new evidence. Police were concerned that Glenna's denials and the trauma she had suffered might convince a jury that she was innocent. One day, Christine was awakened by the parrot's voice and went to see it. She was amazed by what it was saying. She decided to use her phone to record the monologue. The parrot kept repeating, "It says, beg Glenna, don't shoot him." This caused Christine's great shock and fear. For a while afterwards, she was even haunted by nightmares. She immediately informed the police and later showed them the video recording. Although the use of a parrot as a witness in court was unprecedented, from that moment on, all of the detectives' suspicions about Glenna's involvement in the case were confirmed. New details of the case have attracted widespread public and media attention. Meanwhile, the investigation continued. The incident was again in the news at the end of June 2016 when police arrested Glenna. They had been collecting evidence to piece together a full case that would clearly show the jury who the killer was and help the Martin family get justice. It was initially thought that the footage of the parrot accusing Glenna would not be used, as it might seem too provocative, and it was uncertain how the jury would react to it. The prosecutor argued that Glenna was in severe financial trouble and could not admit her gambling failures to her spouse. For a long time before the murder, she neglected to pay bills because all her money went to cover debts from her gambling addiction. Eventually, she decided to end her life, writing 2 letters, one to her husband and one to the children. This suggested that Glenna did not initially plan to harm her husband, but something went awry. The final straw was the failed sale of the family home, which was put up for auction without her husband's knowledge. When Martin found out about this from Christine, he likely confronted Glenna. A fierce argument may have ensued, leading her to kill him in a fit of rage before deciding to end her life. Glenna and her lawyer claimed that she had no memory of the shooting or the letter and insisted that she loved her husband too much, so she can't hurt him. They presented a list of medications she was taking to improve cognitive function as evidence of her mental condition. She also denied searching online for how to use a gun, stating that she only used her phone for games and calls. The trial lasted 10 days. The prosecution believed it had a strong case to persuade the jury. However, the jury seemed uncertain, due to the largely circumstantial evidence. Then, a video of the parrot's words was introduced as a crucial piece of evidence. Experts say the parrots form a close relationship with their owner, Martin, and they learn to imitate Martin's voice. Most experts agree that those words left a strong and deep impression on the parrot's memory, so it repeated them over and over again. In the end, this evidence was effective. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found 49 years old, Glenna guilty. In this case, the parrot played an important role as a witness, contributing to finding justice. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Deborah Jeter. Deborah Jeter was born in 1976 in Georgia, USA. She was raised in a loving family and since childhood had a passion for helping people. When it came time to choose a career, Deborah decided to become a nurse without hesitation. She enrolled in a local college and pursued her nursing education. Alongside her studies, Deborah also focuses on building relationships. Deborah's boyfriend is a young man named Lester Jeter. They began a romantic relationship, and later both decided to move forward with married life. After marriage, they had 2 children. Their first child, named Kern, a year later, they had a second child. Because of their close age gap, the siblings were very close and did everything together. After graduating from college, Deborah to work part-time as an anatomy and physiology teacher. She also joined an exchange program as a licensed professional nurse. From an early age, Deborah's daughters began experiencing problems. Deborah often shows aggression towards her children, and sometimes she has no control over her behavior. In 2004, she was accused of physically assaulting her eldest daughter, Kirsten, during a quarrel. However, this was the first and only incident of such behavior, so the charges were eventually dropped. As a result of this incident, Deborah was briefly hospitalized in a psychiatric facility and then underwent rehabilitation. She was diagnosed with several disorders, which were the cause of her depression. The experts concluded that Deborah's unusual behavior was linked to her mental disorders. The doctors reported that she managed to get these issues under control after receiving therapy. However, some of Deborah's neighbors believe she is still having difficulty controlling her behavior. Her frequent aggressive outbursts affected her husband and children, and she often acted impulsively. She would yell over anything, which was alarming. The situation seemed serious, as the police were repeatedly called to her house. However, every time the officers arrived, she would calm down. After the incident with Kirsten, Deborah avoided contact with the children. Each time, when the patrol officers would arrive, find nothing amiss, and leave after advising her to remain quiet and calm. Although there were numerous complaints about her loud and hot-tempered behavior, the officers felt powerless to intervene. This situation took a toll on her family, who bore the brunt of her aggression. Deborah's mental health issues seemed to get worse, leading to high tensions. Deborah's husband, Lester, struggled to endure the constant shouting and arguments. By 2009, the situation had become unbearable. In May, Lester decided to end the relationship and filed for divorce. Deborah was devastated. It seemed she genuinely loved her husband, but due to her mental health difficulty, so she was unable to control her behavior. Lester's decision to divorce was a significant shock for Deborah. She repeatedly tried to convince her husband to heal their relationship and discuss their issues. However, Lester was so frustrated with Deborah's behavior that he rejected any talks. Lester openly told his wife that their family had no future and he would never come back. He also mentioned that he intended not only to end the marriage but also to seek custody of the children. Lester was genuinely concerned that his wife might lose control when he wasn't around their daughters, fearing she might harm them. His worries were justified as Deborah's behavior became increasingly erratic. Lester worries about the safety and well-being of his two daughters, Kelsey and Kirsten, but he cannot predict the tragic fate that will befall them. That same month, after Lester declared his intention to divorce, Deborah attempted to end her life. She ingested a lethal dose of antidepressants, but was saved by the doctor's quick response. The most distressing aspect of this incident was that Deborah did this in front of her daughters, making her husband even more worried about her mental health. He feared that the stress of the divorce could worsen Deborah's illnesses. Unfortunately, resolving the legal issues of divorce is time-consuming, making the divorce process complicated and difficult. Nevertheless, Lester was determined to proceed with the divorce to protect the children from their unstable mother. Deborah's mental health issues clearly worsened after her divorce proceedings started. She and her children moved in with her mother. Naturally, Deborah suffered the most, but her frequent outbursts of anger and constant aggression also affected the children. Lester wanted to resolve all the issues quickly to minimize the trauma for the girls. Unfortunately, time was not on his side. Deborah attempted to end her life, which was a shock for the children. They couldn't understand their mother's behavior or the struggles she faced. Meanwhile, Deborah, at 30 years old, risked losing everything she had built with her husband over the years. Her world was falling apart, so it was no surprise that she was deeply shocked. Lester was determined to take action. He understood how serious Deborah's problems were and the danger she posed to herself and others. After Deborah's attempted to end her life, Lester insisted that her contact a psychiatric care center, believing she would receive professional help, an accurate diagnosis, and appropriate treatment there. Deborah took his advice and was admitted on May 22, which came as a great relief to Lester. During her treatment, the children stayed with their father, Lester. He also attempted to obtain a restraining order to keep the children away from their mother. During this time, Lester decided that he should seek full custody of both children. He believed Deborah was unable to control herself and tried his best to ensure the children's safety. Lester has repeatedly applied to court to limit Deborah's meeting in contact with the two girls Kirsten and Kelsey. It was expected that she would not be discharged from the hospital after just 2 weeks. Lester believes that such a short period of treatment was not enough for Deborah to control her behavior, so she remains a threat to her children. However, she was discharged on June 4. By this time, Deborah had not succeeded in gaining full custody despite her efforts. The judge denied issuing a restraining order to limit Deborah's communication with her daughters, considering it excessive. The judge believed the children were not in danger because she had received treatment. A temporary arrangement was made where Deborah would have custody of the children on weekends, while Lester would care for them on weekdays. The day after the custody hearing, on a Friday, June 5, 2009, Deborah planned to pick up the kids around 6 p.m. Although Lester doesn't want to be away from his daughters, he had to comply with the court orders. He had no choice but to hand the children over to Deborah when she arrived to take them for the weekend. Kirsten and Kelsey were happy to see their mother despite her previous rejections. Kirsten and Kelsey genuinely loved her, missed her, and enjoyed spending time with her when she was in a good mood. The eldest daughter, Kirsten, even posted on social media that she would see her mom the next day and expressed her excitement. However, they had no idea of the horrors that awaited. It seemed like a long-anticipated reunion, and Deborah was also eager to see her daughters. During a conversation with Lester, she mentioned that she had a big surprise planned for the children. In reality, a terrible plan had formed in Deborah's mind, which she intended to carry out. Instead of going home, Deborah drove with the children for a while and arrived at an abandoned house near Highway 77. It was a strange and eerie place to take the children. But the girls trusted their mother and followed her, eagerly anticipating the promised surprise. They were impatiently waiting for their mother to organize a special event for them. However, after they entered the house, Deborah pulled out a weapon. Kelsey quickly realized what was happening, but it was too late. She managed to shout to Kirsten to run away. However, Kirsten didn't listen, she charged at their mother, trying to take the knife to protect Kirsten. The struggle was unequal. Deborah stabbed her youngest daughter Kelsey several times. Kelsey was already down, and the eldest daughter Kirsten was desperately fighting with their mother. She pleaded for her to stop, shouting, "This is madness," but Deborah seemed oblivious, ignoring her pleas. Having dealt with Kelsey, Deborah turned on Kirsten, who tried to escape. Deborah struck her, but the wounds were not as deep. The girl began to bleed heavily. Despite this, she clung to life, begging her mother to stop and spare her. Kirsten expressed her desire to live, and perhaps this plea helped Deborah finally regain her senses. She halted the attack and began pacing nervously around the rooms of the abandoned house. In a state of shock, Deborah called the rescue service and confessed that she had killed her child, saying multiple times that she had done so and apologized for her actions. When asked for her location, she informed them that she was in an abandoned house on Highway 77 and mentioned that one of the children was still alive, urging them to hurry and call an ambulance to save the one who wasn't dead. The dispatcher inquired about her name, but Deborah refused to disclose it, stating that she would not reveal her identity. She was pacing around the house, while Kirsten was still alive and pleading for help. Deborah was overwhelmed and couldn't explain what had happened. She asked the dispatcher not to shoot her, stressing that she didn't have a gun. She gave precise directions to the location so law enforcement and medics could find the abandoned house where she had harmed Kirsten and Kelsey. Deborah said one of the girls was already dead, and the other was barely hanging on, as she had cut her throat and was bleeding. She urged them to arrive as quickly as possible, otherwise, the girls' chances of survival were slim. Deborah spoke calmly to the dispatcher, despite being a bit excited. Her voice was generally calm and cold. The dispatcher found Deborah's behavior strange and began to suspect that she had no control over the situation. While waiting for law enforcement, Deborah alternated between calmness and shouting nervously, even insulting the dispatcher. The operator remained composed, continuing the conversation to prevent Deborah from doing anything reckless. Deborah mentioned that if they didn't hurry, she might lose control and harm her second child. She said this completely calmly and without any emotion. The dispatcher realized the situation was extremely serious and that Deborah was unstable. Deborah, who had mental health issues, spoke about her daughters as if they were objects, one whom she has eliminated from her life, while the other is in danger. However, this did not particularly bother Deborah, as she was mainly concerned about her own safety. Deborah repeatedly asked the dispatcher to ensure that the police wouldn't shoot her when they arrived. Although she understood the seriousness of the crime, her focus was on her own well-being, even though one of her daughters is dead, and the other daughter is barely alive. This thing was inconsistent with recent when she tried to end her life, which occurred shortly before the tragedy. However, Deborah clearly did not want to suffer. But is she ready to take responsibility for her actions? The police arrived at the scene and found Deborah on the street, still talking on the phone. She raised her hands to show she had dropped the knife and was unarmed. She repeatedly told the officers not to shoot her, insisting she had no weapons, was not dangerous, and would not attack. Deborah directed the police to an abandoned house where 2 bloody bodies were found inside. Although Deborah was a nurse, she did not attempt to help the children. While speaking to the dispatcher, she walked around the abandoned house and then went outside to avoid seeing the girls' bodies. Deborah wandered around the courtyard while Kirsten sat in blood next to her dead younger sister, Kelsey. Deborah's car was in the garage of the abandoned house, with a small knife on the car roof, the same knife she used to commit the massacre. The police quickly found the knife and arrested Deborah, placing her under constant surveillance due to concerns she might try to harm herself. Inside the abandoned building, officers encountered a horrifying scene. They discovered 2 girls. One of them, Kelsey, was in the bathroom, covered in blood. Because of her injuries, she died at that moment, having bled out in less than a minute. Kelsey was only 12 years old, and her mother had stabbed her with such force that she succumbed to the bleeding almost instantly. It's hard to imagine what Kirsten went through. She was found with similar injuries in the bedroom, but was still alive when rescuers arrived. Kirsten lay in a pool of her own blood, her eyes indifferent, indicating she had lost a big amount of blood. Quick action was crucial to save her life. Her throat was cut from right to left, damaging her airways and one of the main arteries. Surprisingly, her mother, Deborah, a nurse, attempted to clamp the wound to stop the bleeding while waiting for the medics. This may increase her chances of survival. In an emergency situation, the doctors rushed Kirsten out of the abandoned house and took her to Parkland Hospital in Dallas. They performed an emergency operation and battled to save her life for hours. Miraculously, the girl survived. After 4 days, Kirsten was moved from intensive care to a regular ward. Her recovery was incredible, especially since it was initially thought she wouldn't make it. However, her challenges were far from over. Though she narrowly escaped death, a more troubling fact was that she and her sister were found in that abandoned house, having been attacked by their own mother. It's hard to comprehend the extent of the post-traumatic shock Kirsten experienced. During the summer, she was recovering from the operation, trying to come to terms with the fact that her younger sister Kelsey is dead and the fact that her mother was a murderer. At the time of the crime, Deborah lived with her mother in the small town of Malacca, Texas, which had a population of just 2,000 people. Investigators reviewed Deborah's cell phone records and discovered that after taking the children from their father, Deborah headed to Malakoff. There, she seemed to wander along the roads for a while, then she eventually stopping the abandoned house. Detectives believe Deborah was searching for a place to harm the children. Examining the actions of people with mental disorders is difficult, yet the incident in the abandoned house provides disturbing things into Deborah's motives. When life falls apart, depression and mental issues can lead some women to feel that ending their lives is the only option. In many cases, they kill their children first, believing it to be a merciful act. Under the strain of mental illness, a mother may think that her family's collapse will doom her children to endless suffering. In this mindset, she views murder as a way to free them from pain and hardship. Often, these women then take their own lives. In this situation, it's evident that Deborah had no intention of dying. She was frightened and did not harm herself, even fearing that the police might shoot her, showing that she valued her life. The murders of Kirsten and Kelsey were clearly motivated by revenge, intended to hurt Lester extreme pain. She aimed to deliver a cunning and cruel blow to him. The incident was truly alarming. Kirsten and Kelsey's father, Lester, tried to give this case a big push to draw attention to the trial, literally the day after the judge refused to issue a restraining order against Deborah. Instead, the judge agreed at the hearing that she would have custody of her daughter by the end of the week. This decision later raised many questions about whether the judge considered this decision reckless. Unfortunately, Lester's worst fears were confirmed. Deborah killed Kelsey and almost took the life of Kirsten. Lester tried his best to convince the judge that his daughters were in mortal danger. Under no circumstances were they allowed to see Deborah unsupervised. However, the judge maintained that their main goal is to strengthen and unite families, encourage parents to cooperate with each other, to ensure children receive love from both parents. This decision ultimately led to devastating consequences, but the judge's actions were still deemed legal, despite the tragedy that followed. The district attorney stated that it's not fair to blame only the judge for this situation. According to him, responsibility belongs to many parties: the doctors who allowed Deborah to leave the hospital, Lester, along with Deborah. Deborah was expected to face severe punishment due to her past actions. She had previously shown anger and aggression towards her children, including attempting to harm Kirsten. However, the decision to lift the prohibition order on her is still controversial and raises many questions. Generally, in 99% of cases, shared custody benefits children, allowing both parents to support, love, and communicate with them, fostering healthy development. Yet, this approach fails when a parent has serious mental health issues. Child Protection Services claim they were unaware of Deborah's behavior. Staff stated that if they had known about her try to end her life in front of the children, she would never have been allowed unsupervised contact. From that point on, people also focused on the possibility that the family had clearly become victims of leniency on the part of the mental hospital and the justice system. However, this could not be proven. It was known that Deborah had been in and out of such institutions multiple times, with discharges that came too soon. A comprehensive diagnosis typically requires at least 3 months of testing and observation. Treatment and medication may be prescribed based on test results, but their effectiveness is not guaranteed. Doctors then closely monitor the patient's condition, behavioral changes, and the progression of the disease, adjusting medication as needed. This process can take up to a month. And discharge is only considered after a stable improvement in the patient's condition. However, Deborah was released after just a few weeks, suggesting that she did not undergo the full range of required examinations and tests. Deborah promised Lester that she would take Kirsten and Kelsey out and give them a surprise. She wanted to plan a fun evening with activities like singing and reading. However, just 4 hours later, she called emergency services and confessed to killing her children. Her trial lasted a year, and on May 27, 2010, Deborah Jeter was formally charged with aggravated murder and attempted murder. Throughout the proceedings, Deborah was held in prison due to the high bail, which was unaffordable and reflected the severity of the crime. As a result, she remained behind bars until the start of her trial. Deborah's defense team proposed a deal to the prosecution due to the complexity and sensitive nature of the case. Prosecutors fear that Deborah's mental illness could lead to her being released without jail time. Furthermore, a full trial would require Kirsten, Deborah's daughter who had miraculously survived her mother's attack, to testify in court. To spare Kirsten the trauma of reliving the horrific incident, Deborah agreed to plead guilty to a lesser charge, hoping to avoid the death penalty under Texas law. About a year after the murder, Lester and Kirsten visited Deborah in prison. Deborah explained that, due to the turmoil in her life at the time, so she genuinely believed killing her youngest daughter Kelsey was the only way to protect her children from future suffering. She thought that the family's breakup would cause everyone immense pain and, in her mentally unstable state, she saw the murder as the only solution, a twisted form of salvation. Deborah expressed regret about what happened, but she admitted that she still hates Lester and blames him for the tragedy, and she will never forgive him. Kirsten reminisced warmly about the past with her mother. They talked calmly and even laughed together. This was the last time Deborah could peacefully meet with her loved ones. Afterward, she was moved to another prison and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In her situation, this is seen as a lenient punishment because, without admitting guilt, she could have faced the death penalty. Lester was deeply shocked by the incidents, but inspired by his daughter, he decided to move forward. In 2015, he rebuilt his life, remarried, and he and Kirsten removed their social media profiles. Eventually, Kirsten reactivated her account but set it to private. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Rachel McLean. Rachel McLean returned home to Blackpool, UK, for the summer of 1990. She was 18 years old and had just finished her first year at Oxford. Rachel was very busy with her studies and spent all her free time studying. She had a healthy lifestyle and played sports. Rachel had many friends and loved heavy metal music. She joined a local charity where she worked during the summer. While on a day off, Rachel was relaxing with friends at a local club when she met a bartender named John Turner, who had long brown hair. John was from Nottingham and had returned to Blackpool for the summer. Rachel found him attractive and easy to talk to, so they quickly became interested in each other. That night, they chatted. John attended Rachel's 19th birthday party. After the party, they had a passionate night together. According to John, their relationship continued to develop. However, at the end of the summer, Rachel had to return to Oxford, and John returned to Nottingham. The two cities were just over 2 hours' drive apart, so they could easily visit each other. They spent weekends together and kept in touch by letter and phone during the week. John wrote Rachel long love letters, which she enjoyed. John Turner was born in HMP, but as a child he moved to New Zealand with his parents and settled in a city called Bath. The family lived in 2 countries before John returned to the UK to study at King's College. During his time there, he won the hearts of both students and teachers. He hosted a show on the local college radio station twice a week and was a talented athlete on the soccer team. Rachel McLean was a promising student. Her literature teacher at college admired her achievements. Rachel started college in the same year as John. On Christmas, Rachel invited John to meet her parents and they had a nice evening together. Rachel's parents were very happy with her choice, finding John intelligent, good-looking and confident. John became increasingly infatuated with Rachel but was saddened by the distance between them. During this time, she moved into a student apartment on the first floor of the school with 4 other students. John felt anxious and jealous because one of her neighbors was a man and the boys often visited her house. To cope, he wrote and called her constantly. However, Rachel was very busy with work and study. Since there were no mobile phones in those days, they could only communicate by landline. She would often come home at the end of the evening, exhausted, and go straight to bed. She did not have the opportunity to communicate with John regularly. His dissatisfaction increased with each missed call and he became increasingly jealous. His possessiveness became evident during this time and he complained to her, which began to annoy Rachel. On February 11th, she sent him a Valentine's card, calling him the only love of her life. However, around that time, she wrote in her diary about her lover in very unflattering terms. It seemed that she had doubts about whether John was the person she could spend the rest of her life with. On Valentine's Day, John proposed to her, but she unexpectedly refused, which shocked him. She explained that she was not ready. John said that he understood and would wait. They continued their relationship, calling each other occasionally and rarely seeing each other. 2 months later, in April, they planned to spend the Easter holidays together. John went to Blackpool again on Saturday, and Rachel's mother took her back to Oxford because she had important school matters to attend to on Sunday. They planned to have a quiet day together at her student flat, as it was their last weekend before Rachel's exams. Rachel spent a lot of time preparing for her exams. While she was studying, her boyfriend was watching football in the living room because he was a Nottingham fan. That weekend, the team played in the FA Cup semi-finals, so the next day John got on the train and returned to Nottingham. There was no one in the student flat all week because the young people had gone home for the holidays. Everyone wanted to spend time with their loved ones because they wouldn't have the chance until the end of the year. By Monday, her roommates began to return, eager to see Rachel and hear about her weekend. However, Rachel was missing. Her room was empty, the windows were open, but nothing else seemed out of the ordinary. The students assumed she was busy with other activities. On Wednesday, her boyfriend, John, tried to call her, but she did not answer. They had planned to stay in touch, but Rachel did not return his calls. John assumed that she was busy and did not want to bother her. However, after 2 days of silence, which was unusual since their relationship had only recently improved, John began to worry. He called again, but still received no response. The next day, he tried again, but was unsuccessful. There was no social media at the time, so John left a message on her answering machine. But she remained silent. He also sent her a letter by regular mail, which he sent as soon as he got home. The letter arrived in New Mexico on Thursday, and John thanked Rachel for a wonderful weekend and wished her luck with her exams. On April 19, 1991, 19-year-old Rachel failed to show up for her exam, which was especially worrying because she had been studying hard and the exam was extremely important to her. When the exam proctors tried to contact her, they were unsuccessful. Her parents also had no idea where she was, prompting them to report her missing to the police. The Oxford police were initially skeptical. They received dozens of missing student reports each month because parents went to the police station after parties. In 99% of cases, teens sobered up from drinking and returned to school within 24 hours. But that was not the case. This diligent student had been missing for days and had not been heard from at all. None of her friends knew where she was, so the police became interested in what had happened. They immediately went to the apartment where Rachel had gone missing. Detective Susie Krug was looking for information about the students who had been in the same room as Rachel. Victoria Clare, Margaret Smith, Sarah Hume, and John Forby. The friends immediately pointed to Rachel's boyfriend, who was annoying everyone with his jealousy. They showed a letter he had sent from Nottingham around the time Rachel went missing. The neighbors also confirmed that John Turner was the last person Rachel had been in contact with. The room they checked showed no signs of forced entry, robbery, struggle, or blood. Everything was in its place. The police found Rachel's diary, which might contain important clues. The police began to study the contents of the diary. They knew that John was possessive and jealous of his girlfriend, wanting to know her whereabouts and presence at all times. This behavior gradually began to annoy Rachel. Their conflicts often arose over this issue. On April 22, police met with John Turner. 22. During the conversation, John expressed concern about his missing girlfriend. He was asked to describe his activities during the time Rachel went missing. John mentioned that they had a great weekend together and that everything was fine before they broke up. He said that he woke up early, showered, and that they had sex in the afternoon. After lunch, they went to Oxford Station together at around 4:15 p.m., taking a bus. They had a few hours before their train arrived, and while waiting, they bumped into a friend of Rachel's at around 5 p.m. The three of them went to a local coffee shop and had coffee. Rachel's friend was described as a dark-skinned man with long hair, wearing ripped jeans and a black jacket. He was similar in appearance to John, except for his dark skin. John admitted that he could not remember the man's name because they had just met and he did not expect to become friends with him. According to John, the man offered to drive Rachel home in his car. She agreed, and then John and Rachel said goodbye. John returned to Nottingham, while Rachel went with her friend to her apartment. However, John's story about the man was very suspicious. The police suspected that John was lying, and he quickly became the prime suspect in Rachel's disappearance, as she had been missing for a long time, leading to concerns that she might be dead or imprisoned. Urgent action was needed. First, it was important to learn more about the prime suspect, as he was the last known person to have had contact with Rachel, and his story about a black man needed further investigation. Rachel's disappearance left everyone baffled because none of her roommates or friends remembered her having such a friend. In order to gather more witnesses, the police shared information about the case. From the beginning, there was no reason to think that she had run away. The police first checked this possibility by talking to Rachel's family and friends. Rachel had no problems with her loved ones, friends, studies, or personal life. She was eagerly preparing for exams, which made it impossible for her to not attend. Rachel never complained about any problems, nor did she suffer from drug addiction or mental problems. People like her usually do not run away, and all of her belongings were left untouched. This allowed the police to rule out the possibility that she had run away on purpose. The police were skeptical of John's testimony and assigned a police officer to approach him and gain his trust. The officer's job was to observe John's reactions and behavior while updating him on the investigation. From the beginning, the officer suspected John of lying to them, noticing that he became nervous when talking about Rachel, despite his attempts to hide it. Despite these suspicions, a week of surveillance did not reveal any useful information to help the case. Meanwhile, the police were searching the neighborhood for witnesses, K9 units were working with dogs, and divers were examining local waters. Several people remembered seeing John, but no one could confirm that he had left the house with Rachel. In addition, he had not been behaving suspiciously, so this witness's testimony did not add anything to the search. During this time, John continued to cooperate with the investigation. He even helped create a composite sketch of the man who, according to him, was supposed to drive Rachel back to her apartment. John believes this friend was responsible for her abduction. It has now been 2 weeks and police believe she is no longer alive. No ransom demands have been made, ruling out kidnapping as a motive. Search teams, including police, rescue workers and volunteers, have scoured a large area around Oxford, including drains and boating holes, but their efforts have been in vain. The police examined Rachel's diary and discovered her true feelings for John, a disturbing mix of hatred and pity. She expressed that she was unable to confront him directly or leave because she was afraid. Rachel had no genuine feelings for John, and her Valentine's Day gestures were more like a duty than a genuine expression of love. She knew that John was unstable and prone to losing control when angry. Afraid to face this reality, she admitted that their closeness was harmful and needed to end. In stark contrast, John described their relationship as happy, often emphasizing their frequent sexual activity during interrogations. Meanwhile, Rachel wrote of her disgust for him but felt powerless to stop their closeness. The police believe he may have killed her after reading her diary and discovering her true feelings, but more evidence is needed to prove his guilt. John has been actively cooperating with the investigation. He has attended a press conference to draw public attention to the search for Rachel and to help reconstruct the last day he spent with her. John describes the events at the station, claiming that a stranger, whom he says was a dark-skinned friend of Rachel's, was involved in her disappearance. The plan is to closely monitor John's reactions and behavior during these events, as experienced journalists can identify inconsistencies in his story. Many people have noted that John's description of the dark-skinned guy closely matches his appearance, including his clothing, except for his skin color. It is as if he was trying to describe himself but changing his race. In addition, the public took note of John's strange reactions when asked if he thought Rachel was still alive. He vaguely stated, in his heart, he wanted to think so, which further aroused suspicion among the conference attendees. Throughout the conversation, the guy's smile never seemed to disappear. This event greatly promoted the investigation into Rachel's disappearance. Several random witnesses who were watching the press conference on television clearly remembered the events of the day the girl disappeared at the train station. They contacted the police, saying that only John was at the cafe at the station, there was no girl or anyone else with him. Among the witnesses was a man sitting at the next table. He noticed that John seemed very nervous while drinking coffee, constantly looking around and startled. According to this witness, at one point, John took out a piece of paper and started writing. Perhaps Rachel was no longer alive at that time, and John began writing the same letter he had sent immediately after arriving in Notting. All this was done to create an alibi for himself. It has been established that John and Rachel went to the station together by bus, although there were no cameras there at that time. However, during that time in the city, all passengers who boarded the bus and paid for their tickets were monitored by special electronic devices. It was impossible to ride without paying. When checked, it was discovered that Rachel had not paid for the trip, which showed that she was not with John and could not have been there that day. Therefore, John lied. The reason for his lie remains unclear, and it is still unknown where Rachel's body could be. Police suspected that her remains might still be in the student apartment or somewhere on campus. Surveillance cameras covered the area around the building, but none of them showed John carrying any large, suspicious items. Police requested a floor plan of the student dormitory and discovered that there were voids under the floorboards. Police returned to the apartment where Rachel had lived and removed the floorboards. There, they found her body tightly packed in a bag, only 20 centimeters high. The cold weather at the time slowed the body's decomposition. In addition, the space between floors was structurally well ventilated, so the decomposing body did not emit a foul odor and was not discovered until 19 days after her death. Because Rachel's body was so well preserved, the forensic expert was able to determine the circumstances of her death with a high degree of accuracy within an hour. John was then questioned by the police. Initially, he refused to answer police questions. However, the next day, he confessed to killing Rachel. He said that after watching a football match, he proposed to Rachel, hoping that she would accept, but she refused. The couple exchanged a few words. As a result, he lost his temper and attacked her. In his confession, John admitted that he did not understand why she refused to get engaged. She did not want to answer for a long time but finally admitted that she had been having an affair and that she was not sure that she was ready to commit her life to John. In response, he insulted her. Rachel tried to hit him, and after the slap, he lost control and pinned her down on the chair with his weight, preventing her from moving. John claimed that he did not remember what happened next. When he regained consciousness, he found himself sitting on a couch in front of Rachel's lifeless body. Forensic experts confirmed that Rachel had been strangled. There was a deep, thin mark on her neck, indicating the use of an object rather than hands. The tie Rachel had given him for Christmas was missing from the crime scene and from John's belongings, believed to have been used to kill her. After a while, he decided to dispose of the body. Unable to get the body out of the building, he put it in a bag, removed the floorboards from Rachel's room, and stuffed the body into a small space. He then quietly reinstalled the floorboards. John then packed his things and headed to the bus station. While waiting for the train at a coffee shop, he wrote a letter to Rachel. In the letter, he thanked her for the weekend they spent together and mentioned a black man who was supposed to drive her home, which was a made-up story. He had invented this character to support the lie he had created. He also expressed concern for his girlfriend, who would be alone for several days. After sending the letter, he called her several times and left messages on her answering machine. John then wrote another letter, addressed to Rachel in New Mexico, saying that he had tried to call her several times during the week and was very worried, hoping she would call back soon. This deception allowed him to fool the police and the public for 19 days. Afterward, despite his confession, John Turner maintained his innocence. In December 1991, John claimed that his actions were in self-defense. He wanted to avoid a life sentence for premeditated murder, so he argued that the girl's death was accidental. Rachel was described as argumentative and unfaithful, often insulting John. John also stressed the humiliation he suffered at the hands of Rachel. He had erectile dysfunction due to the disease and claimed that she constantly criticized him for it. This was especially difficult during the outbreak when he was unable to have sex with her due to pain in his groin and abdomen. In court, his lawyer portrayed him as the victim. He was a caring man in love, dreamed of marrying Rachel and proposed to her twice, both times being rejected. Of course, all of this is not true, because judging by the diary entries, the girl was generally uncomfortable with intimate contact with John. There is no evidence that Rachel had any intrigue or relationship with anyone else. Rachel's close friends did not know about any other guy. Many believe that she made up the story of the affair to justify her quick breakup with John, but it is possible that she never actually said this, it was just his word. In the end, the jury did not believe John and he was sentenced to life in prison, with the right to parole. John's story does not end there. While serving his sentence, he developed a relationship with a 20-year-old woman who looked exactly like Rachel. She learned about him through a newspaper article and became interested, believing that he had been wrongly convicted. Despite being imprisoned, they began a romantic relationship. Lawyers continued to fight for John's release and maintained his innocence. In 2003, after 11 years behind bars, John was paroled. He returned to New Zealand, intending to start his life over. His girlfriend, whom he met while in prison, followed him to New Zealand to attend university in Wanganui. the city where John lived. Apparently, 11 years in prison did not benefit John because he then attacked and began strangling the new girl, who believed he was innocent. John was 49 at the time. Fortunately, the attack was not serious and the girl was able to escape without serious injury. According to several witnesses and victims, John had lost control of his temper several times in the 6 months leading up to the incident. It was clear that he had anger management issues. John often became jealous and turned small problems into big arguments, often insulting his partner in front of others. Some time after the initial incident, the situation recurred and he attacked her again. During this time, the couple were staying at a motel in the city of Wanganui. There, they argued again. John threw his girlfriend onto the bed, raised his fists and punched her in the face while holding her down with his weight. However, he regained his composure and left the room. A few hours later, the girl texted John, saying that she was ending the relationship. She said that he was dangerous and needed to attend an anger management program. In response, he flew into a rage again, returned to the motel and stormed into the room. He attacked her, tore her clothes off, demanded sex, hit her on the head several times and threatened to kill her. In 2018, the girl reported John to the police and he was charged with assault. He was sentenced to 2 years and 9 months in prison. The sentence was relatively light because the conviction occurred in New Zealand. If the attack had happened in the UK, he would have faced a life sentence. Despite the attack, his new girlfriend told the media that she believes anger management is still an issue for John and that he needs help. She hopes he can control his anger and that they can rekindle their relationship, despite the mental and physical abuse he has inflicted on her. In court, she admitted that he had threatened to kill her if she tried to leave him, although she did not take the threat seriously. John has recently been released from prison, but his current situation is unknown. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Natalia Martinez. Natalia Martinez was born in the late 1980s in Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay, and she was the youngest daughter in her family. While not much is known about her personality, she had a close relationship with her relatives, especially her older sister, Claudia. Her father was a senior salesman for a large international company that sold household appliances, which allowed the family to live comfortably. Natalia was a cheerful and friendly girl. During her teenage years, she formed a close-knit group of friends who supported one another during difficult times. These friends later described her as sociable and able to connect easily with strangers. After graduating from high school, Natalia began spending more time with her friends. They enjoyed going to various parties and eventually expanded their adventures by visiting the beaches of Uruguay for fun. To celebrate her 19th birthday on January 1st, 2007, Natalia and her friends planned a trip to La Paloma, a small resort town, where they stayed for 2 weeks. On January 16th, they traveled to a nearby resort in the city of Relís, where Natalia was delighted to meet her parents and sister, who were there for a 4-day vacation. The Natalia family had a wonderful time enjoying beach activities and were well known in the town, as they frequently visited. They often returned to the same places, making it feel like a second home. On January 18th, Natalia and her sister Claudia decided to drive to Punta del Este, another tourist town less than an hour away from Relís. They planned to stop at a popular local spa located about halfway between the two towns in the Serra San Antonio area. After their beauty treatment, the girls planned to go to a disco with 3 of Natalia's friends. However, as the evening approached, Claudia felt very tired and decided to go home to their parents. Despite this, 19-year-old Natalia Martinez was determined to stick to her plans. She wanted to enjoy herself, so she went with her friends to a popular party at the local nightclub, La Arena Canada, where they stayed until around 5 a.m. As morning approached, the girls decided to leave the party and head home. At that time, Natalia was talking with a man named Leonardo Rakovin, an old acquaintance who owned a bookstore. They stopped near the exit and continued their conversation. However, Natalia became so engrossed in her discussion with Leonardo that her friends decided to go outside and get into the car they had arrived in, planning to head home together. The girls got tired and got into the car. One of them decided to check on Natalia, but when they returned to the nightclub, they found that Natalia and Leonardo were gone. The friends realized that Natalia could not have left alone or with anyone else without letting them know. Since they did not see her leave, they began to worry. They went up to the second floor, out of the bar, and saw Leonardo's BMW in the parking lot. The owner was inside the car, and because the windows were tinted, Rosalia and Silva could not see if anyone was in the passenger seat. However, they did notice some movement inside the car. The girls called out to Leonardo to ask about Natalia. He said he was in the car with a friend and mentioned that he had spoken to Natalia briefly before they parted ways. He claimed he had no idea what happened to her afterward or why she didn't return to her friends. The girls assumed Natalia had gone home, so they got into the car and drove to her friends' relatives, who were at the police station, just a 10-minute drive from the club. Rosalia and Silva stopped near the house and honked to get Claudia's attention, trying not to wake the entire family. However, no one responded, so they returned to the club where they last saw Natalia. The girls continued to search for their friend for about 2 hours, but their efforts were unsuccessful. No one knew where she had gone. Around 8 a.m., Silva returned home, exhausted and very worried about her missing friend. Worried about her friend's safety, she decided to tell her parents everything that had happened. She feared something bad might have happened to her friend. Her parents tried to reassure her, telling her to rest and that her friend was probably already home. So, she went to bed. Yet, when she woke up at 11 a.m. that same day, her concerns grew stronger. The entire Natalia family started searching for she. They quickly got involved, and her friends went to the club together to find out what happened. Unfortunately, they were still unsuccessful. The club was closed, and no one had any helpful information. They searched the surrounding area for clues but found nothing. Around 5 p.m., Natalia's family and friends arrived at the police station. Maldonado police investigators received several photos, including one of all the girls relaxing at a club that evening. This helped them understand what the missing girl was wearing so they could come up with a description for the search. The police took their statements seriously and began investigating. Initially, the family said that Natalia had been at a party where she may have had too much to drink and left with someone. However, Rosalia and Silva insisted that Natalia had not consumed any alcohol that night, as she often denied. They also dismissed the police's suspicions that they had used illegal drugs. Police began a search operation. They first went to the location where Natalia was last seen. The club was open, but there were no surveillance cameras at the time. Police spoke to club employees and learned that a group of 3 young men sitting at a nearby table had been trying to approach the women throughout the evening. Natalia's friends confirmed that the men had been harassing them. Despite this information, police ignored the group of young men and instead focused on the acquaintance with whom Natalia had been talking before she disappeared. It was no surprise that Leonardo immediately became the prime suspect, since he was the last person to see Natalia. However, all of Leonardo's acquaintances described him as a kind and calm person who had never shown any signs of cruelty before and was incapable of harming anyone. He was a young businessman. That night, his girlfriend waited for him in the car while he was talking to Natalia. After that, he said goodbye to Natalia and returned to the car with his girlfriend. From the car, he saw Natalia go down the stairs and go out onto the porch. From that moment on, Leonardo was distracted by his conversation with his girlfriend and did not see Natalia again. However, he was not worried about her, since he did not notice anything suspicious around. No one was screaming or making noise. Despite the police suspicions, Leonardo insisted he had nothing to do with Natalia's disappearance. However, the police did not trust him. They needed to conduct a thorough examination of the BMW he drove away in after the party. Several witnesses reported seeing a similar car in various locations around the city, including near a forest on the outskirts. One man claimed he spotted a couple having sex in a car that matched the description on the night she went missing, near a lake by the woods. Police obtained a search warrant for Leonardo's car. During the initial inspection, they found a long, dark hair on the floor of the BMW and sent it for analysis. However, it did not match Natalia. It belonged to someone else. The interior of the car showed no signs of suspicious activity, no blood, or evidence of a struggle. Police speculated that Leonardo had cleaned the car shortly after Natalia Martinez disappeared, which would explain the clean condition of the car. Police used this detail as part of the evidence against Leonardo. However, they still lacked the evidence to arrest him. On January 22, a passerby driving on the outskirts of Polis discovered several items on the roadside. Among them were a woman's handbag containing a wallet and a pair of women's shoes. The most crucial piece of evidence was linked to Natalia Martinez, a case that was currently receiving significant media attention. Recognizing the situation, the witness promptly contacted the police. Unfortunately, the media coverage also led to the spread of various rumors, which Natalia's family had to repeatedly deny. One such rumor suggested that Natalia was involved with drug dealers, implying that she had become a victim of criminal activities. However, Natalia's father publicly refuted these claims in an official television statement. Despite the situation, rumors continued to spread. Some claimed to have witnessed her being attacked or even murdered. Instead of receiving assistance from the media, police found themselves overwhelmed by numerous false testimonies each day that needed to be verified, complicating the investigation. Meanwhile, the media eagerly reported even the most outrageous theories. The story was considered compelling and attracted many readers, causing journalists to add fuel to the fire of chaos surrounding the case. The rumors about the missing girl were leveraged to boost newspaper sales. Natalia's family endured immense pain following her disappearance. A large-scale search operation was organized, involving many police officers, friends, family members, and hundreds of volunteers. It was quickly determined that there was no evidence of the girl near the nightclub, prompting the search to extend into more distant areas of Uruguay. Ultimately, the entire coast was thoroughly searched. Most of the search operations took place on land, using service dogs, and later involving military and civilian aircraft. The City Fire Brigade also participated in the search and requested that the sewer systems be inspected. However, no traces of Natalia were found there either. By this point, law enforcement had largely concluded that Natalia was deceased, as the likelihood of finding her alive was very low. The critical window for finding missing persons is usually 48 hours. A significant finding occurred when a bone was discovered on the Grande Plateau, but tests revealed it was not human. Although the search had stalled and no new leads had emerged, Natalia's relatives continued their efforts. They remained hopeful that she was alive and being held against her will. In 2000, a female body was discovered in the forest near Lake Yolo. The body was in poor condition and was sent for examination to determine the identity of the deceased. This location was several kilometers from the club where Natalia was last seen, and the clothing found on the body led police to suspect it might belong to the missing Natalia Martinez. After the discovery of the body, police remembered a couple who had been seen having sex in a car near the forest, which drew attention to that area. The forensic expert who performed the autopsy struggled to gather important information because the body was in an advanced state of decomposition. To ensure a thorough examination, 5 forensic experts were called in. They determined that the body belonged to Natalia Martinez. Their overall assessment suggested that she likely did not die of natural causes, as there were faint signs of strangulation on her neck. Although they ruled out poisoning from substances or alcohol, they could not find evidence of physical or sexual violence due to the body's condition. It was noteworthy that the victim was found tied with nylon thread, but it remained unclear whether this occurred before or after her death. Several months later, while the investigation continued, an unexpected development arose. The man who had found her belongings on the roadside was discovered dead at the bottom of a cliff near his home. His name was initially kept confidential. Initially, it appeared that the man had voluntarily chosen to end his life. However, all his relatives insisted that he would never do such a thing. He was a deeply religious man, cherished his life, and loved his family. An autopsy revealed that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, sustained long before the fall from the cliff, suggesting he had been thrown off. This led police to believe the two cases were linked. But more evidence was needed. The next tragic event involved Natalia's father, Ever Martinez. He had fallen into a deep depression after his daughter's death and the damaging rumors that were circulating about their family. He ended his life at home by shooting himself in the head. His body was discovered by his daughter Claudia and his wife. The police closed the case after confirming that he had acted alone, a conclusion that the family accepted. For a long time, police struggled to make progress in the investigation into Natalia's murder. However, new information emerged from text messages exchanged with a friend just days before Natalia's death. In these conversations, Natalia mentioned a man she had recently met online. It was later discovered that he was one of the men who had been at the nightclub on the day Natalia went missing. These 3 young men were sitting at a nearby table, and several witnesses had pointed them out from the beginning of the investigation, but this information was overlooked. Police identified all 3 suspects, who were slightly older than Natalia. After interviewing them, the police became even more suspicious of their involvement, as the men contradicted each other in their statements about where they were and what they did during the night and morning of that tragic day. After this, the police interviewed a witness whose identity was kept confidential for her safety. She was the girlfriend of one of the men who had been arrested. Her testimony revealed that a young man in the group, Rodrigo Verghese, was involved in Natalia's murder. At the time, he was 25 years old, and police later stated that he had previously provided false statements. During the interrogation, police recorded phone conversations that implicated the Rodrigo main suspect. They collected DNA samples from him, but these were not helpful for the investigation due to the advanced decomposition of the remains. After that, the police reached out to the friends and relatives of the Rodrigo. A young man was called to testify on June 8, 2010, along with his friends who had been at a nightclub on the night of Natalia's murder. They all claimed they had no involvement in the incident. They stated that after spending the night at the club, they hired a sex worker to join them in their continued festivities. However, they denied any connection to Natalia. Rodrigo, the prime suspect, denied spending time with the murdered woman and claimed he did not know her. However, messages from the girl revealed that they had spoken online and planned to meet at a party, suggesting that Rodrigo had lied. Initial questioning did not turn up any clues, but a day later, police spoke to the young people again in the hope of getting a confession. This time, Rodrigo confessed. He explained that he had met Natalia online and after chatting for a while, they decided to meet at a club. Unfortunately, their conversation did not go well, and as dawn approached, he suggested they go to another nearby nightclub. Rodrigo misled her. He wanted to be alone with her. During this time, he began to harass her, according to his confession. When she rejected his advances, he seemed to accept it. However, Natalia then suffered an asthma attack, which led to convulsions and ultimately her death, as she did not have her inhaler or any medication with her. Rodrigo was confused and unable to help her. He stated that he panicked during her attack and didn't know what to do, especially when she stopped showing signs of life in his car. After the party, he planned to return to his family's farm, a short distance from the city. However, after Natalia's death, he decided to dispose of her body to avoid any further repercussions. He headed for the woods, thinking it would be a good place to hide her. There, he tied Natalia up, dragged her deeper into the woods, and covered her body with branches. But this was only part of the story. A witness walking along the beach claimed to have seen a couple having sex, and Natalia's body showed signs of strangulation. It seems that Rodrigo neglected to mention that he had strangled and raped her at the same time. Police were later able to confirm that Rodrigo's other friends were not involved in the incident, so they were released shortly after Rodrigo confessed. Rodrigo was formally charged with murder and taken into custody. After the confession, it appeared that the prosecutor's office would easily prove the Rodrigo's guilt. However, in mid-2010, as preliminary hearings began, Rodrigo Viens recanted his confession. He claimed he admitted to the murder under police pressure and insisted he did not commit the crime. This assertion seemed unlikely because his confession included numerous details only the actual killer would know, including the precise location where the girl's body was found. Still, Rodrigo maintained his innocence. Despite the evidence against him, his defense team supported his statement and sought to demonstrate that Rodrigo was not at the club that night. They presented mobile phone data and a statement from his employer confirming that he had been working his usual evening shift that day. The next day, he attended a friend's wedding, and no one noticed anything unusual about his behavior. On September 2, 2010, Leonardo Roccovan, the bookstore owner who was initially the main suspect in the investigation, was called as a key witness for the prosecution. Leonardo testified that during a conversation, he had an argument with a young man. Leonardo identified the young man as Rodrigo. This indicated that Rodrigo was definitely at the nightclub and not at work. Natalia's friends also confirmed that he was at the nightclub that night. Forensic experts, working with the prosecution, provided insights based on the autopsy results. They noted that, due to the typical symptoms of asthma, the girl could not have died from an asthma attack so quickly. While she did experience an asthma attack, it could not have occurred instantaneously. It took several hours. Additionally, there were signs of strangulation on the victim's neck, which was likely the cause of death. Unfortunately, the experts could not provide further details about the victim's injuries. From late August to mid-September 2010, the prosecution successfully constructed a narrative of the crime, leading to Rodrigo Viens being found guilty of Natalia Martinez's murder. He received a 9-year prison sentence. However, in February 2011, Rodrigo's lawyer submitted an appeal, claiming that the court's ruling was incorrect and that the prosecution was biased. The lawyer argued that they failed to present a witness to the kidnapping or murder, nor did they provide any compelling direct evidence. Natalia's family expressed disappointment, saying that the criminal received a lighter sentence than the family had expected. Disappointed by this leniency, Natalia's relatives filed a civil lawsuit against Rodrigo Viens for causing harm to Natalia's family, holding him responsible for her father's death. Initially, they mentioned that Rodrigo should pay $15 in damages. However, after further discussion, both parties agreed to increase the amount of damages to $7,000. The court rejected the request for a longer sentence. On October 27, 2014, the lawyer achieved his goal when Rodrigo, 29, was pardoned after serving only 4 years and 2 months in prison. His release was largely due to his good behavior while in custody. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Melania Ray. This is the story of Melania Ray, a striking woman who was a drill instructor in the Ken Regiment at the time of the incident. She was married to Salvatore Paralisi and they had a 1-year-old daughter, Vittoria. The family lived in a small village called Oscolaquina, near the San Marco Plateau in Italy. At this time, tourists walking along the paths below the mountainside could not see the flowers that usually bloom on the plateau because the snow had only recently melted. However, a bar and small shops were open, allowing visitors to stroll and enjoy the view. The tragedy occurred on Monday, April 18, 2011, around 3 p.m. On that day, Salvatore arrived in the area with his young daughter after parking his car nearby. He entered a small bar, used the restroom, and then asked the locals if they had seen his wife, Melania. She had recently given birth and had gone missing. At the time, she was 28 years old, athletic, and had long dark hair. When Salvatore learned that no one had seen Melania, he became more anxious, pacing back and forth. He eventually broke down in tears, expressing his fear that his wife had been kidnapped. The people there decided to support him and his daughter by helping to search for Melania. They went out onto the porch and walked along the path from the parking lot to the bar, hoping to find any sign of her, but they found nothing. The Salvatore explained that earlier that morning, he had been with his wife. After lunch, they went to the plateau, where he played with his daughter near the swings in the playground. His wife had planned to step away briefly to buy coffee and use the restroom, but she did not return. Sensing that something was wrong, he began calling her numerous times over the past 15 minutes, but she didn't answer. He realized her phone was missing and suspected that she might have been kidnapped by people in a passing car. The Salvatore remained at the bar and spoke with the owner, Giovanna, but the longer he stayed, the more unusual his behavior seemed. First, Salvatore was inadequately dressed for a cool spring day. Second, he seemed to neglect his 1-year-old daughter while he grieved for his missing wife. The little girl wandered through the bar, grew hungry, and felt cold, but her father paid no attention to her needs, continuing to cry and recount his story about his wife's disappearance. At 4:34 p.m., a call came into the local police station from Giovanna, the owner of a bar. She called the emergency services because Salvatore had just left, reporting that he had not been able to find his wife for over an hour and was concerned that she might have been kidnapped. He had his young daughter, just over a year old, with him, and the father was clearly upset. When he returned to the bar, Giovanna handed him the phone to speak to the police. The shaky man gave the dispatcher some details about himself and his missing wife, Melania. He mentioned that she had a hernia, which may have worsened as they were near the mountains. He repeated the story he had shared with others, emphasizing that Melania had disappeared after going to the bar. Throughout the call, he spoke very softly, often mumbling and stuttering, and there were long pauses. Police had to ask nearly every question multiple times to get him to respond. When the police arrived, he repeated his story, explaining that Melania had health problems, so they were forced to go to the nearest hospital. They then decided to stop for a walk and coffee. While she was out, Salvatore stayed at the playground with their daughter, who was playing on the swings. When Melania did not return, he became concerned and tried calling her, but she did not answer. This was unusual, as she usually answered her calls. Worried about her silence, Salvatore eventually went to the bar where she was supposed to be and began asking people there if they had seen her. As time passed without any news, Salvatore grew increasingly desperate. The police asked him detailed questions about Melania's appearance and the moments leading up to her departure. Salvatore insisted that she was fine, she had just needed to use the restroom, and there was no sign of abnormal. At the scene, the police verified Salvatore's identity and began their investigation. They first conducted a quick analysis of his phone data, looking into his recent interests and searches to evaluate his credibility. The police learned about Salvatore Paralisi, born on August 28, 1987, in the province of Naples, Italy. At the time Melania went missing, he was with their daughter in Felina. His wife, Melania Ray, was born on May 24, 1982, in another small town in the province of Naples. Since both were military personnel, the Carabinieri promptly contacted their military unit for further information. To assist Salvatore, a friend of his who was also a police officer arrived at the scene. He wanted to help Salvatore take care of Vittoria. Eventually, the police were able to gather all the necessary information and then released Salvatore and his daughter. Melania's relatives were notified of the situation shortly after. They rushed to the scene to learn more about what had happened and assist in the search for Melania. During discussions with police, Salvatore acted unusually. As a military man, he knew it was important to provide accurate information to the police to help find his wife quickly. Instead, he dodged questions and slowed down the investigation. Police had to ask him for Melania's cell phone number 3 or 4 times before he shared the information. The police wanted to track Melania's mobile phone to locate her and track her movements. There were only 3 busy walkways between the bar and the playground. One was more than 100 meters long and was mostly visible from the kiosk cameras. The second was much longer and led to the War Memorial, a destination that often has a lot of people passing by. The third walkway, 150 meters long, was also closely monitored by cameras. Surprisingly, however, nothing was seen. The cameras did not record any footage of Melania, raising doubts about whether she had been in the area that day. Data shows that Melania's cell phone was last active at 2:45 p.m., just before she went missing. The activity was near the location where she had been staying with Salvatore and Vittoria. Unfortunately, this information did not lead to any further details. The only hope for the search lay with the National Mountain Rescue Service. Experts were called in to help, bringing equipment and sniffer dogs. Dogs' sense of smell is so acute that they can follow a scent for up to 20 days after being left behind. The dog quickly oriented itself and followed the asphalt road to the monument. At that point, the trail appeared to end, suggesting that Melania may have gotten into the car and driven away. However, Salvatore later mentioned that they had been in the area just over a week ago. This leaves 2 possibilities. The dog was following Melania's old scent, or she had actually been abducted. Afterward, the police took Salvatore to the station for questioning. There, he recounted all the details of the day leading up to Melania's disappearance. According to him, she visited a physiotherapist around 11:30 a.m. They then went to a supermarket and later visited the San Marco clinic, where doctors diagnosed her with an inguinal hernia. After lunch, they returned home to change clothes before going for a walk with their daughter. Salvatore noted that they had been in the area for the past month, making Melania very familiar with the territory. Salvatore mentioned that he and Melania had gone to a bar together during their visit. After gathering all the necessary information, the police sent Salvatore home. The main theory of the police was kidnapping, based on information gathered with the help of sniffer dogs. They believed that Melania had approached the road, was abducted, and her trail suddenly ended. All the evidence suggested that she may have been forced into the car. In May, Salvatore appeared on television to share his story, revealing new details. He mentioned that he and his wife had a small picnic near the War Memorial and were relaxing there on the day she disappeared. Salvatore also described the clothes and accessories Melania was wearing when she went missing. Interestingly, he noted that she did not have her handbag with her personal belongings at that time. She was wearing casual clothes and several gold ornaments. However, it was puzzling how a responsible woman could embark on a long trip with a child without any preparation or a handbag. She didn't even have money or cigarettes, which she usually smoked. Melania also forgot to bring a milk bottle and clothes for her daughter. Another point of confusion was how she could have gone to the bar to buy her husband coffee if she had no money. Salvatore's statements became increasingly contradictory, leading to suspicions that he might be lying. With these concerns in mind, the police decided to question Salvatore again to learn more. Salvatore claimed that they had a strong relationship and that they sometimes disagreed on various issues. But these disagreements never escalated into conflict. In general, they had a great, strong family, which was confirmed by relatives and friends. Therefore, the Salvatore was released. The next day, Melania's relatives arrived in town and stayed at a small apartment near the Salvatore home. Although exhausted from the trip, they made it a priority to visit the police station to ask about the investigation. They provided any information that could help locate Melania as quickly as possible. It was discovered that Melania had 2 phones that Salvatore did not mention. One phone was used to contact her husband and friends. The other phone was used to talk to her mother and close relatives. At 1:34 p.m. on the day Melania went missing, her mother-in-law called the second number. They had a conversation that lasted about 9 minutes, during which Melania shared details about the day. She mentioned that her family was going to San Marco to go for a walk and attend the christening of a friend's child at around 4 p.m. The call ended at 1:43 p.m., and there was no further communication. The police got no new information out of Salvatore. His testimony was largely a rehash of what they already knew. The police were puzzled by his decision to stay with the child. They questioned why Melania didn't bring Vittoria along when she went out for coffee. The trip from their house to the park took less than 20 minutes. Did Melania really need to go to the bathroom during that time? And most importantly, where did the girl go afterward? Melania's relatives moved into the Salvatore home and spoke to him regularly about the situation, but he remained quiet and sad, often avoiding their questions. Salvatore's relatives tried to support him as much as possible, helping him care for Vittoria. On April 19, 2011, the entire city learned of Melania's disappearance. This was shocking, as the suburb was known to be one of the quietest and most peaceful areas in the area. Although the police suspected Salvatore, he had no previous legal problems. Salvatore frequently appeared on various television shows, discussing the tragedy he was facing. To clarify what had happened that morning, police checked Salvatore's cell phone. They found that it had been on from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. but then turned off until 6 p.m. That same day, Salvatore drove to Plateau San Mar, where the armed forces, police, and search teams were working. However, he showed little interest in the search efforts or their progress. Instead, he returned the sweatshirt he had borrowed from Giovanna, a bar owner, on the day Melania went missing and quickly left, claiming that he had to go to work. His behavior aroused suspicion among the police. While examining Salvatore's mobile phone, the Carabinieri found something noteworthy. He had been in constant communication with a girl named Ludovica for the past month, exchanging thousands of messages and making calls almost every day. It became clear that he was having a romantic affair with her. Salvatore had fallen in love with Ludovica Pero in September 2009. And their relationship continued even at home in 2011, after Melania went missing. In the summer of 2009, Melania discovered his infidelity and was furious. At the time, she moved in with her parents and she was pregnant with their daughter. Despite this, Salvatore continued to pursue Ludovica, who was 27 at the time and working in their military unit. Eventually, for the sake of their child, Salvatore and Melania reconciled, and she returned home. However, his love affair continued. He often rented an apartment to see Ludovica. After completing her training, Ludovica was sent to Rome, but their relationship continued. Salvatore spent most of his free time talking to her on the phone. Their conversations showed that Ludovica wanted more than a long-distance relationship, but Melania's presence got in the way. In the months leading up to Melania's disappearance, there had been tension between Ludovica and Salvatore. Ludovica wanted him to be with her, and he kept delaying their time together. Melania was determined to keep their marriage intact, especially after discovering that her husband was still seeing Ludovica. She even threatened to expose his relationship with his mistress, which could have jeopardized Salvatore's job. This threat scared him, causing him to distance himself from Ludovica. Melania believed that her tactics had worked, thinking that their relationship was back to normal and that Salvatore's feelings for Ludovica were just a passing love. Melania was determined not to give in. She wanted to resume their relationship, while Ludovica was urging him to leave his family for her. He found himself caught between two women. The situation escalated to the point where, on April 19th, Salvatore traveled to Rome to meet Ludovica's parents, hoping they could start a life together. The issue was that Melania was completely unaware of this plan. At the same time, he was supposed to be spending the holidays with his family, including Melania and their daughter. Just a day before this meeting, however, his wife went missing. This turn of events seemed very suspicious, as love triangles rarely have happy endings. When Salvatore returned to work after his wife went missing, management suggested a rescue operation. They suggested assembling a team of soldiers and using specialized equipment. However, Salvatore remained remarkably calm and insisted that such an operation was unnecessary. He believed that his wife had left him out of resentment, so no operations needed to be organized. Salvatore then deleted his social media accounts, which he had used to communicate with Ludovica. This led the police to discover a potential motive for the crime. By now, the crucial time to find the missing person alive had passed. The police took the situation seriously and concluded that they had no chance of finding Melania alive. The search dog used in the investigation did not detect new traces or scent of Melania. On April 23rd, police received a call from an unknown man who identified himself as a mushroom picker. He reported seeing the body of a woman 17 kilometers from Felina. Police arrived at the scene shortly after. The body was found to be Melania's. Forensic experts discovered multiple injuries on her body during the autopsy. These injuries were consistent with stab wounds caused by small knives, mainly to the head and neck. There were also injuries to her chest and some self-defense wounds. Although Melania was not raped, significant evidence was collected from the scene, including her cell phone, a bloody lighter, a water bottle, and traces of a small car. The most important piece of evidence was a grocery store receipt from the morning of April 18th. Additionally, insulin syringes were found nearby, suggesting that Melania may have been abusing drugs. However, a toxicology report confirmed that there were no traces of alcohol or illegal drugs in Melania's system. The police received information from Salvatore about an interesting coincidence. A few days before Melania went missing, she and her husband had an intimate encounter in the same area behind the kiosk where her body was later discovered. Somehow, this information reached Ludovica, who was furious, having been lied to. He had repeatedly assured Ludovica that he was no longer intimate with his wife. This revelation only added to the complexity surrounding their relationship. However, on the day of their encounter, it was snowing and very cold, making it unlikely that they would engage in intimate relations outdoors. Additionally, it was known that Melania was experiencing pain from an inguinal hernia at that time. Given these factors, the narrative of a passionate encounter at the kiosk doesn't seem reasonable. However, this is just an assumption that needs to be proven. The police conducted a thorough search of the surrounding area for any traces of blood. They discovered various pieces of evidence, including shoe prints. In order to gather more information about the suspect, it was important to determine who was in the area at the time of the victim's death. During that time, soldiers from Salvatore's and Melania's regiments were present. In fact, The soldiers accidentally left behind some evidence, such as a water bottle, a store receipt, and shoe prints. This complicating factor hindered the police investigation because much of this evidence was irrelevant to the case. Additionally, the soldiers reported that they did not see anyone suspicious that day and confirmed that no body was present. The police decided to examine Ludovica more closely. They discovered that she did not leave the barracks on April 18th to 19th, providing her with a solid alibi for the time of the crime. Ludovica also shared crucial information, stating that on April 17th, she had spoken with Salvatore about their relationship. During this conversation, Salvatore mentioned that his wife was cheating on him. It was revealed that Ludovica was not Salvatore's only affair. He had previous relationships with other soldiers and women. Although Ludovica was aware of this, she did not consider it significant. Ultimately, it was uncovered that the Salvatore had been involved with several women simultaneously. Salvatore was aware that the police had obtained this information and feared it could be seen as a motive for the murder of Melania. To gather evidence against Salvatore, police installed a wiretap in his car and also eavesdropped on his telephone conversations. This yielded crucial information. Salvatore often talked to himself in the car about his wife's murder, raising suspicions of his involvement in Melania's death. Police obtained permission to search Salvatore's car with luminol, discovering traces of blood inside. Samples were sent to a lab, and subsequent testing confirmed the blood belonged to Melania. Meanwhile, the prosecutor's office was developing its theory to understand the motive behind the crime. They believed that Melania was a controlling person who harbored deep resentment towards her husband for his many betrayals, yet she kept him around for the sake of their child. This constant pressure worsened their situation. He sought an escape by starting a relationship with Ludovica, who also exerted pressure on him. In this relationship, he felt like a third wheel, leading him to consider getting rid of his difficult wife. Forensic experts have submitted their full report, confirming the findings of the medical examiner. They determined that Melania died between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m. on April 18th, from 35 stab wounds. It is likely that the attack occurred while she was urinating, as evidenced by her squatting position and an empty bladder. The attacker probably approached her from behind and struck when she least expected it, leaving little chance for her to defend herself. The nature of the wounds indicated that the assault was particularly brutal, stemming from personal animosity. It was confirmed that Melania never reached the plateau on the day she died, based on geolocation data from her mobile phone. The prosecutor's office believed they stopped near the kiosks in the pine forest, where they allegedly engaged in sexual intercourse. This occurred around 2:30 p.m., and it was at this point that Salvatore unexpectedly attacked and killed Melania. Afterwards, he returned home, changed his clothes, took their young daughter, and went straight to San Marco, where he entered a bar and pretended to be a heartbroken husband whose wife had left him. Despite his claims of innocence, the jury found the evidence against him compelling. As a result, Salvatore Paralisi was convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison. He was also ordered to pay €2 million to Melania's family. Salvatore maintains his innocence and is currently serving his sentence in a reformatory in Milan. Custody of Melania's daughter was given to her family. Now 13, Vittoria has expressed her desire to change her last name to her mother's. She does not visit her father and would rather he not know about her choices. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Andrea Del Vesco. Andrea Del Vesco was born in Chicago, USA, in 1994. Her parents, Arthur and Leslie. Her older brother, James, was 2 years old at her birth, and her younger sister, Alexis, was born 4 years later. The family was happy and loving, moving several times before settling in Austin, Texas. Andrea's mother, Leslie, studied financial marketing at Southern Methodist University. She worked for American Airlines and then as a customer service manager in the mortgage division of Citibank. Andrea's father, Arthur, managed the family's assets as the owner of an investment firm. His hard work helped the family become quite wealthy, allowing them to live comfortably. The family's wealth enabled them to send all their children to university. Before that, the children attended a private school with a rigorous academic program taught by the best teachers in the state. From an early age, they engaged in a wide range of activities, from sports to religion, which helped instill high moral values in them. Andrea excelled academically, played sports, and developed in a well-rounded manner. She loved visiting museums and learning about art. She is kind and caring towards those around her. She has a particularly close relationship with her mother. From a young age, Andrea and her family traveled a lot, which broadened her horizons and exposed her to many different people and cultures. As she grew up, Andrea became her parents' hope and pride. In 2012, after finishing school, she applied to several educational institutions simultaneously. Her parents hoped she would attend the University of Chicago, where her older brother was studying, and for a while, Andrea preferred this option too. However, she decided to wait until she received responses from all the schools she applied to before making a decision. Ultimately, she chose the psychology department at the University of California, Los Angeles. By 2022, this university was ranked among the best in America. It has always been highly regarded and prestigious, with highly qualified teachers and a strong scientific and technical foundation. This choice reassured her family. Andrea then moved to Los Angeles to attend school. Her parents were happy with her decision and supported her choice, although they were worried that she would be too far away. Her brother would no longer be able to take care of her. With the support of her family, she began her new life. Upon arrival, Andrea needed to choose a club to join, which helped her develop lasting friendships and gain support from more experienced students. To become a full member, one usually needed to pass a test and make a small donation. The student community was very close-knit, with many students living so openly that they left their doors unlocked, allowing them to visit each other freely. Although it was generally safe, incidents could still occur. Andrea happily joined the club. She had a great sense of humor, was good-looking, and dressed well. Her impeccable style made her popular. She also created many extravagant outfits that amazed everyone. Andrea was the center of attention at any party. However, she balanced her social life with her studies. After completing her freshman year, she got a job as a paralegal at a law firm in Brentwood, handling administrative tasks. This job did not fit her schedule, so she found a new part-time job. She kept changing jobs to better balance her work and studies, allowing her to have pocket money and not have to depend on her parents. Andrea continued her student life until she graduated in 2015. She always dreamed of traveling after finishing her studies. As her senior year approached, she lived in a dormitory just 5 minutes away from the main university building. This dorm is a great place for students, hosting many sorority parties and university events. Andrea shares her living space with her sorority friends and a small dog she adopted from a rescue. She loves her pet so much that she even has a social media page dedicated to posting cute pictures of it. One day, the dog goes missing, leaving Andrea devastated as she searches frantically for it. Luckily, her beloved dog is found 5 days later. In September, Andrea is preparing to start her senior year of college, with classes scheduled to begin on September 24th. However, the fall semester officially starts on the 21st. On the 19th, she shares one of her favorite music videos on her social media page. The very next day, September 20th, 2015, is the last day before the girls in the club return to school. Everyone was having fun on the balcony of the apartment building. Andrea was at a club activity until 3 in the morning with her friend Jessica. Jessica then went to her bedroom around 3:30 and went to sleep, while Andrea lay on the couch in the living room. However, Andrea could not sleep that night. A few hours later, Samantha, another neighbor, came running to Andrea's door, screaming about a fire. Andrea's door was closed, which was unusual because she always left her room open for her friends in the club. Samantha tried to open the door but couldn't, so she called the other girls to help. Together, with great difficulty, they managed to open the door and found the room filled with smoke and fire. They found Andrea lying motionless on the bed but could not call her because of the danger. Realizing that they could not safely enter the room, the girls evacuated and called 9 people at a time. They waited on the sidewalk for help. Later, the fire truck arrived at the scene. Firefighters quickly used hoses to extinguish the fire on the second floor. A total of 32 firefighters worked to effectively extinguish the fire. After the incident, rumors spread among the students that Andrea was dead, as she had not escaped the building and was not seen. When the firefighters finally entered the room, they found the body of a woman lying on her bed. During the investigation, the police determined that the fire started in Andrea's bedroom. At the scene, the police were unable to identify the deceased because her face was disfigured by the fire. They were only able to confirm that it was a female body. Fingerprints could not be taken because her hands were too badly burned. Surprisingly, the girl's small dog was found by firefighters. The dog was severely burned, barely breathing at the feet of its owner. However, it was later decided to euthanize the dog to reduce its suffering. After the incident, the dormitory students were relocated to different housing while repairs started on the burned building. The girls were frightened, leading the university to enhance campus security. Everyone believed that Andrea was the victim of the fire since all other students were confirmed safe during roll call. They reported seeing Andrea lying on her bed in the room that was on fire and were puzzled as to why she did not get up and leave. They found it odd and speculated that she might have lost consciousness, suffocated from carbon monoxide, or had already died. Andrea's parents returned to Austin from a long trip, unaware of what had happened to their daughter. They began to worry when Andrea did not reach out to them, and their attempts to contact her were unsuccessful. Concerned, her mother called one of their neighbors and learned about the fire, which might have involved Andrea. However, the police had not yet confirmed the identity of the body found at the scene. The entire family gathered to pray for Andrea's safety and traveled to Los Angeles. Meanwhile, police began investigating the case. They discovered that Jessica, Andrea's neighbor, was the last person to communicate with her before the tragedy. Police planned to interview Jessica to gather details about their last conversation, hoping she might have witnessed something important. Police interviewed Jessica to learn how the fire started, but her answers were not helpful. She quickly stated that she saw nothing and had no idea what caused the fire. Friends from the sisterhood, who also spoke with the police, suggested that Andrea may have accidentally fallen asleep with an aromatic candle still lit. They were convinced that the fire was not set intentionally, as Andrea had no enemies or anyone who wished her harm. To verify this theory, a detailed examination of the incident scene was needed. Initially, they inspected electrical appliances and outlets for any short circuits, but everything appeared to be in order. No candles were found at the scene, and the only item that raised suspicion was the trash can located at the head of the bed. Experienced firefighters speculated that this could be the starting point of the fire. However, friends and members of the sisterhood confirmed that Andrea never slept near the trash can, which was typically placed at the opposite end of the room. Unfortunately, the contents of the can could not be identified without a detailed chemical analysis, as everything was completely destroyed. Forensic experts specializing in arson were called in to investigate. 2 hours after the fire was put out, police were convinced that it was not accidental. The critical piece of evidence was a metal trash can, which someone could have used to pour flammable liquid and ignite a fire. The flames originated near the head of the girl's bed and spread throughout the room. Forensic experts confirmed their suspicions when it was clear that the fire was intentionally set. The investigation at the crime scene intensified. Forensic experts found a large number of traces of blood splashes on the bed and around it, with most of the stains surviving the fire. Police were concerned when neighbors reported trying to call the Andrea as they entered her room at the start of the fire, but she did not respond and was found lying motionless. They feared she was already dead and suspected that the perpetrator had set the fire to destroy evidence. By this time, the police had already pieced together a rough timeline of the events from that tragic evening. They interviewed many students, focusing mainly on the roommates. According to the roommates, a group of girls had been chatting on the balcony before entering the apartment building. The last confirmed sighting of Andrea alive was at 5:50 a.m. Samantha, her roommate, was preparing for work on campus and saw that Andrea was sleeping on the couch in the living room at that time. Samantha left for work and returned around 6:30 a.m., but Andrea was no longer on the couch. She had gone to her room, but this time her door was closed, which was unusual for her. This behavior struck Samantha as odd, and she wondered why Andrea had suddenly gone to her room and shut the door, especially after being fast asleep before. Feeling concerned, Samantha noted this difference when she then saw the fire. While talking to other students in the dorm, the police discovered a significant clue. A girl named Sarah returned to her room around 5:30 a.m. after dropping her boyfriend off at the airport. Her apartment was directly above Andrea's room. Since it was still dark at that hour, Sarah noticed a male figure as she tried to open her front door. The building was for women, but it wasn't unusual for guys to visit their girlfriends, so she didn't think much of it at first. However, she became alarmed when the man immediately ran away upon seeing her, as if he was trying to hide. This frightened and confused her. She described the man as wearing a black baseball cap, a black and white t-shirt, and dark jeans. Feeling scared, Sarah hurried into her room and locked the door. Once inside, she quickly texted her boyfriend to tell him about the suspicious man she had seen. Unsure whether he posed a threat or if she should contact the police, she shared her concerns. Her boyfriend reassured her that it was likely just someone visiting, suggesting there was no need to panic. Later Sarah went to bed, but around 6:15, she was awakened by a woman's scream and the frantic barking of a dog from the room below her, where Andrea lived. This startled her, especially since the dog had never barked before and usually stayed calm. She realized something was wrong downstairs. Sarah tried to reach Andrea to check on her, but couldn't get in touch. She called 911, but the emergency services didn't take her seriously because the area was known for its student parties and noise. Still, a patrol car was dispatched to the dormitory. The police arrived around 6:23 but left a few minutes later without updating Sarah on their findings. They reported seeing nothing unusual, no person, no barking dog, and no screams. They only shined their flashlights into Andrea's room from the street without conducting a thorough investigation. Believing that someone might have had too much to drink or had an argument that upset the dog, the police decided to leave. Meanwhile, Sarah was watching from the window and tried calling Andrea, but no one answered. She also tried to contact the other girls in the building, but it seemed that everyone was asleep. After the police left, she heard a loud bang at around 6:45 a.m. Sarah rushed to the balcony and looked down, seeing thick smoke rising. She also spotted a stranger in a black and white t-shirt jumping from the balcony below. Panicking, Sarah feared that the man had harmed Andrea. She quickly grabbed her phone and called 911 to report the situation, then ran downstairs, where other students had gathered near Andrea's room, trying to open the door. Sarah quickly left the building to chase the intruder. She spotted him and ran after him down the street, but he escaped by getting into a red Nissan and driving away. Sarah recalled a detail on the car window that had a fraternity sticker. Meanwhile, Andrea's friends had made it into her room. They called out to her, but there was no response. The students claimed they saw her lying motionless on her bed, surrounded by flames. Several girls noticed blood on her neck, chest, and shoulders. In a panic, the friends left the burning house and saw the red Nissan speeding away, with Sarah in pursuit. However, none of Andrea's friends could identify anyone who might have wanted to harm her. All of her friends had cared for her, and at the time of her death, she was not in a romantic relationship. The investigation looked into the possibility of a robbery, but nothing was stolen from Andrea's room. It is thought that Andrea may have met someone on Tinder and the date did not go well. But this has not been confirmed as there are no leads. The police reviewed the surveillance footage from the campus, but it was unhelpful because of its poor quality. They searched all nearby streets for a red Nissan car with a fraternity sticker that had been spotted near the crime scene. Police interviewed all the students, focusing on fraternity members and residents of nearby homes. Nicholas and Mohair later reported a burglary, claiming that their laptops and speakers had been stolen, and one of them said that the keys to his red Nissan were also missing. This occurred on the same evening as Andrea's murder. A few days after the fire, police officially identified the charred remains as belonging to 21-year-old Andrea Delvesco, using dental records provided by her family. An autopsy conducted on September 22 indicated that she was wearing only a sports bra at the time of her death, which raised suspicions of rape, although this could not be confirmed due to the condition of her body. Most of her hair had been burned away, and there was significant blood loss, particularly from the back of her head. Approximately 90% of her body was burned. Forensic experts found multiple fatal stab wounds on Andrea's body, mainly to her head and neck. She had 5 stab wounds on the right side of her neck and 2 on the left, for a total of 19 stab wounds. The lack of soot and carbon monoxide in her body suggests that Andrea was dead before the fire started. This suggests that the fire was an attempt to cover up the crime rather than the cause of death. As a result, the investigation was upgraded to a murder case, creating a sense of fear across the campus. On the day the official forensic report was made public, police traced a stolen laptop and speakers to a man named Joseph in Fresno, California, which is over 3 hours from the crime scene. Police quickly going to his address. When police met Joseph, he claimed that he had borrowed the speakers from his roommate and that he had done nothing wrong. The situation became more complicated when the stolen items were passed around. His friend was Alberto Medina. Alberto claimed that he had lent the items to Joseph, explaining that his friends, who were moving out, had given them to him for safekeeping. However, Alberto then disappeared. Police began searching for Alberto on September 24th. He was arrested 2 days later and brought in for questioning. Alberto's testimony was inconsistent. He said that on September 18th, he went to the University of California with his friend Eric Marquez. They spent the week together, attending a Chris Brown concert and then going to a party with friends who had laptops and speakers. Under pressure from police, Alberto eventually confessed that he had stolen the items from random people while intoxicated and unaware of his actions, and returned home around 5:30 a.m. The police noted that the fire had not started at that time. When questioned about a suspicious stranger, Alberto unexpectedly claimed he was attacked by someone with a gun while they were returning with the stolen items. The attacker fired at them but missed, allowing them to escape. Alberto described the attacker as wearing dark jeans and a black and white t-shirt, matching the description Sarah had previously given. However, the police still expressed doubts about Alberto's story. Alberto suddenly remembered that his friend Eric had visited Andrea, a beautiful blonde woman he met at a party that same weekend. Eric planned to be intimate with her. When Eric returns to the apartment, he acts strange and nervous. Eric says he hit her and urges Alberto to leave quickly. Alberto's account implicates Eric in Andrea's murder. 5 days after the murder, the police interviewed a new suspect named Eric Marquez. He was 22 years old and a fifth-year medical student at the university. Eric had no previous legal problems and was viewed as a good person. His friend Alberto pointed the police to his home, which was only a 5-minute walk from the crime scene. However, getting Eric to confess was challenging. He stated that he spent the entire weekend drinking at home and hardly went out. Alberto and Eric's testimony was confirmed by surveillance camera footage from their home. When the footage was reviewed, both Eric and Alberto were active from 3 a.m. to 8 a.m., frequently wandering the streets. Alberto was wearing a black and white t-shirt and dark jeans. At 4 a.m., Alberto and Eric left the house for an extended period of time. Alberto was easily recognized by the distinctive tattoos on his arms. A key moment in the footage is Alberto returning to the apartment at around 7:11 a.m. with Andrea's red blanket wrapped around him. This corresponds to the time of the arson. Additionally, a red Nissan, matching Sarah's description, was spotted on video. By 7:30 a.m., Alberto and Eric were seen leaving the house again to throw away some trash. At this time, Alberto was shirtless and Eric had changed his clothing. While the cameras captured this evidence, Eric insisted he could not remember anything. Police obtained a search warrant for Alberto and Eric's apartment. A thorough inspection revealed that Alberto had suffered abrasions to his hands, while Eric had no similar injuries. Police found the red Nissan, which had blood on the steering wheel, dashboard, and driver's door, along with trash and a black sock inside. In the apartment's closet, police discovered a trash bag filled with bloody clothing, Andrea's underwear, and a black sock that matched the sock found in the car, a bloody knife, and a blanket missing from Andrea's room. After conducting the inspection, police gathered enough evidence to formally charge Alberto and Eric. On September 28, Alberto and Eric were charged with murder and burglary, and Albert was additionally charged with arson. Despite the threat of the death penalty, both pleaded not guilty. Their families insisted on a thorough, independent investigation, unable to accept that their son could have committed such a heinous act. Police later interviewed Joseph Garcia, who was found using a stolen laptop and speakers. He claimed that he had witnessed Alberto and Eric returning home that evening. Alberto had confided in him about the incident at the dormitory. He had entered Andrea's room after watching her while she walked her dog, then snuck inside. Alberto took a knife from the kitchen, forced Andrea into the room, and locked the door. He raped her, and when she screamed and fought back, he stabbed her to death and burned the house to cover up his crime. Alberto threatened Joseph to keep quiet. An expert found DNA evidence that showed blood on the suspect's clothes and car matched Andrea's DNA. Additionally, a witness named Julio, a cleaner, observed Alberto getting out of his car and walking toward Andrea's dorm. Julio noted that Alberto had a large tattoo on his arm and was wearing a black and white t-shirt. Alberto and Eric both appeared drunk and said they needed to go to Andrea's room because she needed help. Police determined that Alberto had entered the building while Eric was still in the car, so the blood was only found on the driver's side. Andrea's family was outraged by the police's inaction when Sarah first raised her concerns. The officers neglected to check Andrea's room, the likely scene of the crime. The Los Angeles Police Department announced that the officers involved have been suspended and an internal investigation has been launched to look into their negligence in responding to a call from the victim's friend, Sarah. The findings of that investigation have been submitted to the court. Although the officers were acquitted but were still fired. In the fall of 2016, Eric went on trial for his role in Andrea's murder, along with charges of robbery and arson. Eric and Alberto were charged with animal cruelty due to the injuries Andrea's dog suffered in the fire. In September 2017, the possibility of the death penalty was considered for Alberto. His attorneys urged him to accept a plea deal to receive a lighter sentence and avoid the death penalty, but he refused. As a result, the case was split into two separate trials. Eric was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months after pleading guilty to accessory and abetting. It was determined that he did not participate in the murder or arson. He remained in the car throughout the incident. Alberto Medina's trial began on May 15, 2018. He faced a jury on 5 different charges. Despite this, Alberto chose not to accept the plea deal offered by the prosecution. On May 24, 2018, after extensive deliberation, Alberto pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, arson, animal cruelty, and burglary. The judge decided against the death penalty, sentencing him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Additionally, the court imposed another 12 years for other charges. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Hannah Hill. Hannah Hill was an 18-year-old girl from Akron, Ohio, born on May 8, 1981. She had a brother named Justin. By the time she turned 18, she had graduated high school and was ready to begin her adult life. Hannah started searching for a job and secured a part-time position as a secretary. After summer, she planned to attend college. With her job, she was able to save money to buy a car. Hannah was beautiful and well-liked in high school. She had many friends and maintained close relationships with them. Hannah had a 19-year-old boyfriend named Brad. They lived together for a while, but their relationship became troubled, leading Hannah to move back in with her parents. A friend later informed Hannah's parents that the couple frequently argued, and these disputes usually ended with Brad hurling insults. When that didn't work, he sometimes resorted to physical force to assert his viewpoint. Despite these issues and her move back home, their romance continued. Friends advised Hannah to end the relationship, believing Brad was not right for her. However, Hannah finds herself attracted to him, as he is her type. On May 19, 1999, Hannah came home from work in the afternoon, as she usually did. After having dinner, taking a bath, and changing into her pajamas, she settled down to watch a movie. Hannah had no plans to go out that evening. However, while she was getting ready for bed, her friend Jennifer called. They talked for a while, and then Hannah unexpectedly decided to change her plans. Around 10 p.m., she changed her clothes and left the house. She told her mother she was going out for business and appeared worried as she hurried away. Her parents didn't have time to ask her questions or understand what was happening. Although they noticed that the phone call seemed to upset her, they weren't overly concerned since Hannah was an adult and often spent nights with her boyfriend or friends. They had no idea that this was the last time they would see their daughter alive. When the parents woke up in the morning, they noticed that their daughter had not returned home at the expected time. This was not unusual, as Hannah sometimes slept over at her boyfriend's house or stayed out late with friends. At first, they were not worried. However, they then received a call from her company, informing them that Hannah had not come to work. This worried them, as it was unusual for her to be absent from work, considering how seriously she took her job. The parents began texting Hannah, but she did not respond. They continued to wait throughout the evening, still unable to find out where she was. They began to worry about her safety. After calling Hannah's friends and boyfriend, but no one had seen her, her parents contacted the police to report her missing. They gave a description of Hannah and mentioned that her car was also missing, suggesting that she had driven away. Despite this, the police did not launch an investigation. They believed that Hannah was just having fun and would come back on her own, so they postponed the case. This time, Hannah's parents sensed something was really wrong. Hannah seemed to have disappeared without a trace and had not contacted anyone. Realizing that the police were not prioritizing the investigation, they decided to take matters into their own hands. First, they contacted Hannah's boyfriend, but he, like everyone else, had no idea where she was. He said he had tried to contact her, but she had not responded to his messages. Next, the parents started asking Hannah's friends for information. They spoke to Denny, but he also said he had been unable to contact Hannah despite repeated attempts. 2 days later, passers-by reported the abandoned car they had found on the side of the road to the police. The car was found just a few miles from Hannah's home. Witnesses noted that the car looked suspicious because it appeared to have been unused for more than 2 days. Unfortunately, the police did not take Hannah's parents' report seriously. As a result, other police were unaware that the car's owner was missing and were unable to connect the 1996 Geoprism Hannah was driving to the witness reports. As a result, one of the patrol officers was dispatched to the location to simply write a parking ticket, and he took no further action. The next day, Brad contacted the police station where the report was filed. He was angry that the police had not begun an investigation or search for Hannah. He insisted that they take immediate action. After speaking with him, the police reviewed Hannah's parents' missing person report and decided it was time to start looking for her. They also noticed scratches on her boyfriend's body and asked about them. He explained that they had argued shortly before her disappearance due to his infidelity, and during the fight Hannah had attacked him. Although the injuries did not appear to be serious, they raised some suspicions among the police. However, no evidence linking him to Hannah's disappearance was found and he left the police station without incident. His visit helped to advance the investigation and details of Hannah's disappearance were shared with the media. Police hope to find witnesses who can provide further information. Some information about Hannah has emerged. Someone contacted the police after seeing Hannah's car, which was the same car that a patrol officer had been sent to ticket a short time earlier. By May 26th, the car had been parked on the side of the road for a week without anyone coming to pick it up or reporting it. That day, several officers were sent to check on the car. They arrived at the location at 7:30 a.m. The car showed no signs of forced entry or theft. When the officers opened the trunk, they made a horrifying discovery. Hannah's body was inside. This was reported on the news the same day. The body was in a state of decomposition after being in the trunk of a car for a week in hot weather. Hannah was found with her bra pulled around her neck. Her knees were bent and spread, leading police to suspect a sexual motive behind the crime. Hannah had bruises, scratches, and cuts, indicating that she had fought back. Her pager and car keys were found next to her body. Many local residents were outraged that the police did not take her parents' missing person report seriously and did not list her and her car as missing. Hannah remained in the trunk of her car for a week. When a patrol officer arrived to issue a ticket, he did not inspect the car or contact the owner. Many speculate that Hannah may have been alive and the first police arrived and may have been rescued. Even if she had not, the investigation would have begun much sooner, and the passing of a week would have risked losing crucial evidence. Forensic experts conducted an autopsy and determined that the Hannah's cause of death was strangulation. They discovered that she had been gagged, found a white substance on her lips, and noted a bite mark on one of her hands. Her body was covered in bruises and abrasions. Additionally, it was established that she had had an intimate encounter with a man shortly before her death. Forensic experts suspected that she may have been raped based on the positioning of her body, her torn clothes, and the nature of her injuries. It appeared that she had resisted and was strangled before being placed in the trunk. A toxicology report revealed a small amount of alcohol in her system, despite her leaving home completely sober, suggesting she had consumed alcohol elsewhere. Police initially considered Brad the prime suspect because intimate partners were often involved in such cases. When he arrived at the station, they noticed suspicious scratches on his body. Hannah's parents also suspect him of being involved in her disappearance, as they never liked him. During a search of Hannah's home, police found her diary, which detailed her relationship with her boyfriend. They learned that he had been both emotionally and physically abusive towards her, which was confirmed by her diary entries and several witness accounts. The police brought Brad in for questioning. He claimed to have an alibi for the night of her disappearance, stating he was at a party with friends, where they watched TV and drank. Although his alibi was shaky, he passed a polygraph test. Police found him to be genuinely upset and concerned about Hannah, and his body language suggested he was being truthful. The police obtained a recording of Hannah's phone calls that night. They discovered that she had made 4 calls from her home phone. 1 call was to her friend, 2 calls were to Brad, and another call was to a guy named Denny Ross, who was a friend of her boyfriend, Brad. The police then checked Hannah's pager. They discovered that on the night of her disappearance, she had sent several messages to her friends, including Denny, who was mentioned in her diary. Recently, they had become closer and often talked to each other. However, Hannah's friend insisted that their relationship was not romantic. They became friends mainly because Denny's house was a popular spot for parties, as he lived alone without his parents, allowing people to enjoy themselves freely. Their interactions were purely friendly. The police began to view Denny, Hannah's friend, as a suspect in her murder since he might have been the last person to see her alive. Friends described Denny as potentially aggressive, stating that he always got what he wanted and could behave rudely. Police discovered that Denny had a legal problem 2 weeks before Hannah went missing. He had been arrested while selling illegal drugs for $500. Denny quickly admitted to drug possession and trafficking charges. On May 26, he received a suspended sentence for his drug trafficking charges. Police went to Denny's home to question him and investigate his possible involvement in Hannah's disappearance and murder. When police arrived, they found Denny wearing a cast on his arm. Surprisingly, he was on the phone and told police he was talking to a lawyer. Denny claimed that he had injured his hand in a fight a few weeks earlier. When speaking to the police, he mentioned that Hannah had called him around 11 p.m. on the night she went missing. He also provided a significant amount of new information that he had not disclosed in previous interviews related to the case. The police found this disturbing, so he was taken to the police station for further questioning. At the station, Denny said that night, he and Hannah talked for a long time about her boyfriend. She arrived feeling upset and unhappy in her relationship, expressing her frustrations and appearing ready to end it. After their lengthy conversation, they shared a kiss, and then she left around 1:30 a.m. He claimed he never saw her again and insisted she was completely sober. They didn't drink that night. Denny believed Hannah had feelings for him, and he was also in love with her. It was unusual for a man who was in love and possibly Hannah's new boyfriend to choose not to help find her when he had the chance. This raised suspicions, prompting police to quickly obtain a search warrant for Denny's home. On the morning of May 27th, 15 police officers arrived at Denny's second-floor apartment. They found several small bloodstains that he could not explain, which was very concerning. Blood samples were sent to the lab for analysis. Outside, under a bush, they found a trash bag. One officer noticed what appeared to be a woman's shoe inside. When the officers opened the bag, they found women's pants, underwear, and shoes, all of which were stained with blood. It was confirmed that these items belonged to Hannah and had her blood on them. One of the police officers reported hearing a noise outside the window while he was going up the stairs. At that moment, Denny reportedly threw the evidence bag onto the street. Denny was later arrested. However, he maintained his innocence. His father hired the city's top lawyers to defend him in court. The defense team carefully reviewed the case file and the evidence gathered during the investigation. By this time, a collection of evidence had been compiled. Along with Hannah's DNA, traces of Denny were found in a garbage bag. The white residue on the Hannah's lips contained his DNA, and a bite mark on her neck matched Denny's dental impressions. Male bodily fluid was found on the Hannah, but after being there for a week, it was no longer suitable for analysis. Police believed that Denny not only killed her but also attacked, forced, and raped her. The defense argued that Denny's DNA found on Hannah's lips and the bite mark did not prove that he had killed her. It only showed that they had intimate contact. Furthermore, the defense emphasized that the police mishandled the initial investigation, leading to a lengthy delay in locating Hannah's disappearance. Instead of finding her within hours of her parents reporting the incident, it took police a week. To cover up their negligence, the attorneys argued the police tried to charge the first person they encountered. The attorneys noted that the police did not interview enough potential witnesses and did not look for other suspects, focusing only on Denny. The attorneys said that several bags of fast food were found in Hannah's car and that Hannah had stopped at a fast food restaurant shortly before her death. However, the police did not go to the restaurant to interview the staff. It is possible that Hannah encountered a dangerous person during her trip to the restaurant, leading to the attack and subsequent death. The defense argued that the blood found at Denny's house did not belong to Hannah, and that it was unreasonable to think that Denny with a broken arm could have raped and murdered a girl in his own home, since he could not have overpowered her with such an injury, especially given the complete lack of DNA evidence linking him to the victim's car and the evidence bag. The attorney argued that someone had intentionally framed Denny. The police have a different opinion. When police arrived at Denny's home, he allegedly threw an evidence bag out the window. However, Denny maintained that he did not throw the bag out the window. There were no fingerprints on the bag, and it did not match any trash bags he had at home. Police also did not test the temperature of the bag, making it impossible to determine whether it had been outside for minutes or hours. Meanwhile, Hannah Hill was buried in a family plot in Kentucky the day after her 19th birthday. The trial of Denny Ross began on October 17, 2000. Hannah's friend, Jennifer Edwards, was the first to testify. She described Denny as an unreliable person who could be aggressive and physically violent. Jennifer said that after Hannah disappeared, she visited him. But he claimed that he had not seen Hannah before she disappeared, although in fact, they had met, which meant that he was hiding something. The lawyers argued that the bag had been placed under Denny's house by the real criminal. They stressed that Denny had no motive to kill Hannah. They were not romantically involved, they simply liked each other and had a future together. So why would he kill Hannah, the person he loved, and give up the chance to be with her? The defense argued that the Brad, who was extremely jealous and had previously been violent towards Hannah, might have been driven by jealousy towards Denny, leading him to kill his partner. The defense also pointed to scratches on the Brad's body that he had when he arrived at the police station. He admitted that Hannah had caused the scratches but claimed they occurred before her disappearance. However, this could have been a lie. The police's failure to investigate his statement thoroughly and the prolonged search for Hannah's body could result in significant penalties for police due to negligence. Thus, the defense believed the police were eager to close the case quickly to avoid facing serious consequences. Forensic experts had compelling evidence that the girl had been intimate before her death but were unable to prove this due to the state of decomposition. By the time the body was discovered, it was already quite badly decomposed, making it difficult to draw conclusions. However, the prosecution claimed that the nature of the injuries found on Hannah's body, her position, and the state of her clothing suggested that she had been brutally raped. A chemist analyzed the white substance found on Hannah's lips. The results showed that it was a common compound that could not be definitively linked to Denny. The expert noted that the same material was used in many different products. Therefore, it was impossible to determine with certainty that Denny was involved in the white substance on her lips. Meanwhile, the defense team has been working hard to prevent rape charges against Denny Ross, because under state law, he could face the death penalty for both murder and rape. At the time, the jury found the evidence bag near Denny's house suspicious. They struggled to understand why Denny would have kept the victim's clothes there for a week. Furthermore, if someone threw the open bag from the second floor, there was a chance that the contents would fall out. Instead, the bag lay neatly, as if it had been placed there intentionally to attract the attention of the police. As the jury deliberated their verdict, they discovered that a juror had reviewed documents related to Hannah prior to the trial. By law, jurors are not allowed to have third-party information in advance because it could create bias and influence their opinions. As a result, the trial was deemed invalid and a new jury had to be held. However, because the documents declaring Denny Ross innocent of rape had already been signed, he could not be indicted again for the same crime. As a result, the jury was discharged and Denny was granted a temporary release. After a year of probation, the main suspect was sentenced to 25 years in prison after he attacked with a knife and raped another girl, 32-year-old Jennifer. He beat her severely, breaking her collarbone and jaw. The girl pretended to be dead so that he would leave. She immediately contacted the police afterward. It is unknown whether he would have killed her if he had noticed signs of life. Investigators thought that she was very lucky, as Jennifer bore a strong resemblance to the deceased Hannah. Following this, the discussion of the murder of Hannah Hill resumed with renewed vigor. Despite the fact that a man could not be tried twice for the same crime of rape, he could be tried for murder. Therefore, a new trial took place. The only thing he could not be sentenced to was death in court. In addition to the old evidence and witnesses, new ones were discussed. In particular, ex-girlfriends of Dennis spoke, claiming that he inclined them to intimate relations and used violence. Mutual friends of Dennis and Hannah testified that the defendant was obsessed with the deceased and, after the discovery of her body, he boasted that he had slept with her and even strangled her. During the retrial, the prosecution's case was much stronger. DNA testing had advanced significantly since Hannah's death, allowing experts to detect Dennis's DNA in drops of blood on Hannah's trousers and underwear. Dennis's DNA was also found under the fingernails on Hannah's left hand and on the deceased's t-shirt. A witness was found who saw Dennis throwing something out of the window of his apartment. When police discovered the bag with the victim's clothes outside, this witness also stated that she heard screams from Dennis Ross's house on the night of her disappearance and was sure that he was the one who raped and killed the girl. The witness even listened to a phone conversation in which they were discussing Hannah. The state appealed and that decision was overturned. Denny could have faced a retrial and he returned to court in 2012 to face murder charges. The trial also mentioned his attack on Jennifer, who survived and survived. Jennifer said that they met at a bar, had a few beers, and she invited him to her house with friends. However, when they returned, Jennifer began to feel unwell and asked everyone to leave. Everyone left, except Denny, who went upstairs to use the bathroom. After a while, Jennifer went looking for Denny. When she found him, he attacked her, stabbed her in the face and dragged her down the stairs. He hit her with such force that he broke her jaw and collarbone. Denny threatened to kill her children if she tried to escape. When Jennifer tried to run away, he choked her from behind. He raped her while holding a knife and continued to choke her. Jennifer was shocked when she couldn't breathe and passed out several times. She pretended to be dead, at which point Denny released her but showed no concern for her condition. Denny eventually kicked her several times, but she remained still, and he eventually left. She then called 911. Jennifer spent 6 months recovering in the hospital. In response to his testimony, Denny claimed it was a lie and insisted that they had consensual sex. When asked about Jennifer's injuries, he suggested that she must have fallen or been attacked by someone else, denying any involvement. Denny's father, Alan, defended his son during the trial. He explained that he was at Denny's house when Hannah arrived that night. She was crying and depressed after an argument with her boyfriend. Hannah needed Denny's support, and they talked to each other instead of going out. By the end of the night, she had made it out safely. Alan believed that Hannah may have been attacked outside, but he insisted that it was not his son who hurt her. The prosecution presented a different version of events, claiming that Hannah, upset over an argument with her boyfriend, went to Denny for comfort because she trusted him. They alleged that Denny took advantage of her vulnerability and began harassing her, but she refused. The prosecution raised doubts about Alan's presence in the house, noting that Denny lived alone. With the new evidence, the jury concluded that there was enough evidence to convict him. As a result, Denny Ross was convicted of murder and tampering with evidence. 13 years after Hannah Hill's death, Denny was sentenced to life in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 19 years, when he will be 67 years old.